Yo, that beat goes hard. Visuals and beat by Paranoid American, paranoidamerican.com. And that he made that when he had hair. So, that was a long time ago. But welcome, my homunculus and homunculi and femunculi. Welcome to the Alchemical Chamber. We're going to be talking some alchemy today. And I have two very special homunculus with me today. Welcome, returning guest, Professor Longo, and everyone's homie Romy. What's up? What's up, bro? You're live, bro.
What is happening, sir? It's tremendous to be here with you today. I'm very excited. And hello, Mr. Longo. Nice to meet you.
Hello. How are you?
Professor Longo. This is Lil Longo, and people are asleep on Lil Longo because this is a man that's probably read like 10,000 books. I mean, I don't know how many books this guy is. Look at the art he has behind him. I mean,
yeah, what you got going on back there, sir?
What is that, bro?
What is that?
The tapestry to my house.
Ooh, yeah. Nice.
I don't know what it is. It's some kind of French like chateau or something. You got the house, the pond, and you got like some kind of crane or something. I don't know.
Well, we love it, bro. Welcome again. This is a live. I felt like going live spontaneously just because, right? I think the air was ripe for this episode. And homie Romy, you want to plug anything? Longo, you want to plug anything before we get started and really jump into this alchemical goodness?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to say that having the art, presented, it goes in theme with today's conversation, as Rudolf is known as one of the greatest art collectors of the Renaissance, and he was just, pronounced in his endeavor for the best esoteric art that he could find. So find that very fitting. Any plugs? I'm not feeling very pluggy yet. I'm ready to get juicy.
Oof. Okay, baby. All right, settle down, little homunculus. You want to plug anything, Longo? I know you're a very enigmatic man. I know you're very private. I don't know if you want to for the people.
Yeah, the Longos are not big pluggers, to be honest. We let our work speak for itself, and that's about it.
Yo, you think this hat's gonna trigger the algorithm? We're live on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and I don't know what else. So we're live on a whole bunch of places. Hopefully I don't make esoterica great again. So if y'all haven't noticed by the title, we're gonna be talking about Rudolf II, the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, this all got started. It sprouted from a couple episodes that Longo and I had done. And we've been having plans on talking about Rudolf. And here we are. And then another person that I know who's passionate about Rudolf is my boy, homie Romy. So we all got together. And it all started with this book, which I got at a bookstore that is in South Florida somewhere, right? And I was delightfully informed that it's discontinued. So shout out to
print,
Peter. Yeah, out of print. Yeah, so that would make it
somewhere, but I have one too.
That would make it more valuable,
nice.
Right?
Yeah, dude, they're like maybe $40 now. They're a little expensive.
Give it a nice whiff, bro. Smells good. All right, so we read this, and I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this book. Shout out to Peter Marshall, and it's The Magic Circle of Rudolf II, Alchemy and Astrology in Renaissance Prague. Now, he does talk about Rudolf, but he focuses on his magical posse because you name it, and any heavy hitter of ever was around this guy. He was attributed to sparking the scientific revolution because of the court that he had. He had Tycho Brahe, he had John Dee, Edward Kelly, Copernicus was around at this time. You had Descartes around at this time. You had all the greatest.
Giordano Bruno.
Bro, Bruno was around. He had just gotten burned before. Yeah, so
Kepler too.
Kepler, all these guys were around the same time. Now, I'll be 100%. I got kind of sad, and I told Romeo over the phone, I was like, it was a kind of sad story, and my favorite part about it was the cabinets of curiosities, which we'll get into because I have a whole bunch of stuff on that, and we're gonna keep it as structured as possible on this chat. Homie Romy's gonna pull up a presentation, and we're gonna kind of do it chronologically with the side tangents. Try to keep it to a minimum, but whatever. We're gonna go hard in the paint. We're gonna talk all about Rudolf, a little bit pre-Prague, Habsburgs, all that good stuff, and then we'll get into towards the end of his life. But I was a little sad because it's a story that really he just wanted to chill, right? With all his stuff, he just wanted to hang out. He just wanted to create the philosopher's stone, and then you had all this the politics and everything going on at the time, which he could care less about. And I was kind of sad for Rudolf. Like he like it resonated with me. And if you think about it, I kind of have a cabinet of curiosities behind me. I have a stone from the Coral Castle back here. I have a globe. I know it's going to trigger a whole bunch of people. I got my alien mask. I got my Nick Cage cutout. This is my microcosm. And that's what these guys were all about. That was a phenomenon during this time. But let's get into it. Let's start talking about, I'm going to pull up here Romy's presentation. What is this, bro? You got dolphins here?
Yeah. And so I'm hoping that that Longo can chime in too, because I know he's deep in history as well when we start to talk about some of these different characters. But I found this to be kind of funny, and because it's called Rudolf in Prague, right? So
Yes.
like the era of Prague when he was in reign was called Rudolf in Prague. And our buddy Donut over on that channel just did the Illuminati Dolphins video. So I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. So yeah, the Rudolf, and we'll get into more of that later. But he was quite literally known as the most esoteric and occult king in history, right? Like most kings and queens, rulers, what have you, they have esoteric undertones, right? They have occulted undertones. The Vatican has always had occulted undertones. They have the syncretic secrets, but it's not on the surface. You have to dig to find these strange symbolisms. But Rudolf was, in fact, open about it. Like one of the only rulers that you can just be like, he's all about the occult and he's not hiding it. So that's what I was just like, this guy, but he was also trying to fight for what's right. But so it's a very interesting and deep story. I mean, inevitably we're going to only scratch the surface today. But yeah, so I figured it'd be good to kind of like give everybody a little chronological order of this. So as we slide down, we got another slide here that says, well, who the funk were the Habsburgs? Okay. He was a part of the Habsburgian bloodline. And a lot of people are familiar with the Habsburgs for their quote unquote deformities.
Their chin, baby.
The Habsburg jaw, right? So the House of Habsburg, or alternatively spelled Habsburg in English, and also known as the House of Austria, they are still prominent in Austria, is one of the most prominent and important dynasties in all of European history. The Habsburgs' monarchical positions include Holy Roman Emperors and the Roman German kings, the rulers of Austria, kings of Bohemia, the kings of Spain, kings of Hungary, king of England, kings of Portugal, grand princes of Transylvania, kings of Galicia and Lodomeria, and emperor of Mexico even. It is said that where the Habsburg line started was with this man here, known as Guntram the Rich. And the Guntram the Rich is where he actually got cast out as well. But he had some of his riches cast out with him. Guntram the Rich, the chronology of the Murray Abbey, the burial place of the Habsburgs, written in the 11th century, states that Gutronimus Dives, Guntram the Rich, was the ancestor of the House of Habsburg. Many historians believe This indeed makes Guntram the progenitor of the House of Habsburg. However, this account was 200 years after the fact, and much about him and the origins of the Habsburgs is uncertain. But if true, as Guntram was a member of the Echeconider family, it would link the Habsburg lineage to this family. Now, they believed that they were very, very royal and that their blood went all the way back. So royal that they couldn't even start to consider sleeping outside the bloodline. No way. If you're a Habsburg, you sleep with a Habsburg. When the Habsburg Rudolf I was elected the Roman German king in 1273, his family was already 300 years old. However, lack of documentary sources and confusion between fact and legend make it very difficult to reconstruct the family tree prior to this day. Genealogy was all part of the parcel of dynastic propaganda in order to demonstrate their legitimacy. Medieval rulers had to display the noblest possible descent. This resulted in all manner of outlandish family trees, and in one case, the Habsburgs went back to the Trojans via a number of Roman families, Julius Caesar and Aeneas, while in another line of descent from the Trojans passed to the Carolingians, the Merovingians, and the Franks. It was even claimed that they were descendants via Osiris and Jupiter, Ham, and Noah. Another claim made is that they shared common bloodline with the Babenbergs, which is another huge family. Well, one of the names of Rudolf II's illustrious children, secret, he did have kids, was Julius Caesar. So this kind of tells us that they believed that they were dating back to some of the most ancient bloodlines.
And this dude was slinging that alchemical P9, if you know what I mean, bro. This dude was just putting it down his whole entire life. I mean, right? This dude was a baller, man, and that's why, like, he was going in, and how you said at a time that it was very superstitious, a very religious time, and this dude was super open about. So every kingdom had its own ruler, and everyone was in charge of how they ruled their own kingdom, essentially, right? Their own section. And when I was reading this and reading through the history, I felt like I was reading like a true real life Game of Thrones. That's what it was like. And that's why it was so entertaining to me, because it was like, dang, this is how it really was back then. These dudes were cutthroat. And I mean, we're going to get to it. I mean, even how he ends and what happens there, but continue, please.
Okay. Just to give even more depth to the Habsburgs and the Babenbergs and where this family comes from and how long they've been in power and that they still have power today, that this bloodline has just been going on for so long. I found some good text on this. The first nucleus round, which the present dominions of the House of Austria, this is the origin of the name of Austria, by the way, gradually accumulated, was the mark which lay along the south bank of the Danube, east of the river Enns. Founded about AD 800 as a defense for the Frankish kingdom against the Slavs, which always plays a role here, the east versus the west, although its total length from east to west was only about 60 meters. It was associated in the popular mind with a large and almost unbroken tract of land in the east of Europe. This fact, together with the position of the mark with regard to Germany in general and to Bavaria in particular, accounts for the same name, Österreich, i.e. the East Empire or realm, a word first used in a character in 996, where the phrase in region vulgari nom Österreichi occurs. The development of a small mark unto the Austro-Hungarian monarchy was a slow and gradual process, and falls into two main divisions, which almost coincide with the periods during the dynasties of the Babenberg and the Habsburgs, which respectively ruled the land. The energies of the House of Babenberg were chiefly spent in enlarging the area and strengthening the position of the mark itself. And when this was done, the House of Habsburg itself set with remarkable perseverance, marvelous success to extend its rule over the neighboring territories. So they had power and this very prominent ancient land by the Danube River, which has mystical qualities going back to, the Tuatha De Danann, and other very mystical bloodlines, the hidden underworld, if you will. It seems that they were part of that syncretic takeover that the Romans and the Greeks were very known for. And so that's that on the Habsburgs, just to give you guys how deep this bloodline goes. And now we're going to look at some pictures of some of these deformed fucks. All respect given.
And I want to add real quick, bro, and this is going to be in my Pythagorean Palace presentation, but this family really was, because Rudolf, he as a young boy lived in the Escorial, or El Escorial, which is 100%, bro, a hermetic building, and it's 100% a Pythagorean, the perfect example of what a Pythagorean palace is. That is one of them. We'll pull up a picture here in a little bit, but yeah, I found that really interesting that he lived in this, Pythagorean palace that supposedly that was built according to these magical principles. And how you're saying that not only are they, that's why I believe I did an episode on ley lines and the parallels, how these ancient bloodlines, if you will, they understand the powers that the earth itself, right, geomancy, has. And so they're building their lines, their lineages along these lines and along these places around the world. And they're tapping into that energy, that occulted energy, if you will. Is that a dude on the right?
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a Habsburg, so who knows? We got a current Habsburg here, right? Everybody knows
very nice,
the famous Jay Leno.
Yeah. Do you know how many siblings Rudolph had?
Didn't he have like 16?
15, yeah.
15.
Yeah.
Oh, he was the 16th. Yeah.
Hey, baby.
Yeah.
And his parents were first cousins.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's nuts. That's nuts. So the thing with that and with that inbreeding is what led to a lot of these crazy accounts of rage, turmoil, depression, deformities, right? And it the crazy ruler, and that it's just so ignorant in a lot of ways to like keep it in the bloodline. Yeah, keep it in the family, sure. Keep it close with your friends and everything, but don't you see how it's clearly just fucking with you? Like, I don't know. It's so interesting. I would do anything. I mean, I would hope that Dennis is part of this, Yeah, Dennis from It's Always Sunny here. He's just got a Habsburgian draw. I don't know. Look at this. Also, what's this?
Hey, baby.
Got the cup on. Fencing cup.
Oh, is that what that is? Really?
Probably.
Yeah, he's got the sword there too.
Yeah, that's a homunculus, bro. Hold on. I got the button for it, bro. Have you heard my new sounds?
Yo, play him.
Yo, I'm about to go in, baby. Ready?
Certified homunculus.
Hey.
Homunculus confirmed. Good God, that's a homunculus.
Hey, and then the last one right here.
Homunculus confirmed. Eat a bag of dog dicks.
Oh, is that Longo?
Juan spends all his money on these things.
No, that's actually AI generated. Shout out to Paranoid American. He is an AI wizard, so he made those for me. But yeah,
I think Paranoid. I think our boy Thomas PA Paranoid American is a robot of sort. I think he's a cyborg, dude. He is so
an
good.
automaton. I agree 100%. I think we should start a petition or something to get right to reveal. That's what, dude. Now it makes sense. The fan in the room is charging him as he's going, like this ethereal fan. Boom, right? Like some Dyson sphere type of thing. That's ethereally just like the little fan on the hat. Instead of having that, he has it up on his roof, dude. Come on, bro. We know your secrets, Paranoid American. I know you're watching, dude.
You can't get nothing over us, bud.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what's interesting about the Habsburgs, right, is like you have that classic chin, right? That long chin. But that reminded me of the long skulls of these ancient mystical beings of the past that are mysterious. And I was like, well, if they're calling themselves, connected to the lines of Osiris and Jupiter and things like that, then wouldn't they want to almost imitate these ancient practices of keeping that mystical bloodline going? And so, you have elongated skulls obviously found in Peru. Peruvian elongated skulls, very famous accounts, and obviously in Egypt. But one of the more recent mysteries is what they found at the in the underground layers in Malta. And this makes it even a little closer to home, gives it a European home. So I was like, I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting. Obviously, it's a stretch. But look at this. This is funny. So a little background on elongated skulls, not to get too off topic, but look, it says here, Chongos, the Longos. Ayo. Sorry. The skulls were discovered by the respected Peruvian archaeologist Julio Cesar. Okay. During excavations in 1927, 1928, on the northern side of Cerro Colorado, the area of the Paracas Peninsula, they found 429 mummy bundles, and they were recovered in 2 clusters at a site known as Wari Kayan, a large subterranean structure. The mummies were wrapped in cotton cloth, some of which were embroidered with wool to create elaborate patterns, which are among the best South American textiles ever found. The mummies were then placed in baskets in a sitting position facing north, as will all South American mummies. The preservation is due to the natural desiccation. Almost 400 embroidered cloths were recovered. So you have Julius Caesar here yet again, keeping it in the bloodline. He's a famous Peruvian archaeologist.
I'm sure that's just a coincidence, Romy. There's nothing, right? You conspiracy theorists and always trying to connect these dots.
I said it was a stretch. I just thought it was kind of funny.
There's no such thing as a homunculus.
Oh, look, we got Longo out of the room. He's like, I'm out of here. We're dealing with stretchy fabrics like this. Here's a fun word things, but dragging out the dragon bloodline. Perhaps it's the Habsburgian bloodline, which connects itself to the Golden Rule.
Bro, this is very slick dissident-esque what you're doing right now with these.
we found to keep the esoteric doctrine alive, we need to inbreed so we can imbue the secrets in our genetic memory by using the royal jewels. So something that's really interesting about the Habsburg line and anybody that was going to be named emperor, Holy Roman Emperor, this was founded, the Golden Bowl rule. The Golden Bowl was what basically created the separation of church and state. And so, not to be confused with the golden calf, but the Golden Bowl or the Chrysobowl was a decree issued by the Byzantine emperors and monarchs in Europe during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. A Golden Bowl was a decree issued by the Byzantine emperors. It was later used by monarchs in Europe in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, most notably by the Holy Roman emperors. For nearly 800 years, they were issued unilaterally without obligations on the part of the other parties. However, this eventually proved disadvantageous as the Byzantines sought to restrain the efforts of foreign powers to undermine the empire. The Golden Bull of Emperor Charles IV, Constitution of the Holy Roman Empire, promulgated in 1356 by the Emperor Charles IV, it was intended to eliminate papal interference in German political affairs and to recognize the importance of the princes, especially the electors of the empire, which, like I said, is that separation of church and state, because due to that rule saying, no, we won't have the Pope's interference here. You cannot F with us, right? Like, we are going to create our rule and do our thing politically. So, you had this thing then created called the Imperial Diet, which started to basically create all these massive laws all throughout anywhere that the emperor struck his hand. The Imperial Diet was known as the deliberative body of the Holy Roman Empire. It was not a legislative body in the contemporary sense. Its members envisioned it more like a central forum where it was going to be important to negotiate than to decide. Yeah, okay, keep telling yourself that. That's where they were making the rules of how they were going to continue forth.
Longo, you got anything to add here, bro? Because I know you were a Renaissance era connoisseur.
No, but he did touch on the Byzantine connection. And there's definitely a lot of connections there. As you know, the Byzantine Empire was kind of like Rudolfian Prague, where it was Christian to a degree, but also heavily involved in syncretism. So that, like, you know, where they were in Constantinople, in like the sweet spot between the Middle East and Asia and Europe. So they had everything coming in. And same thing in Prague. So you see that there's a lot of connections there in my mind. And the church was definitely doing fuckery on both ends in Constantinople and in Prague. Probably a lot of the same things going on, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They know what they were doing. But how you're saying, like, they were very free, which that it has a name, and I forget what they called it in the book, but he was very, I can't even think of the word right now. But anyways, you know, he was very, not, I don't want to say liberal, but he was very open to a lot of different religions. And I can't imagine that the church or the Vatican was very happy about what they were doing here, because I know they wanted them to stay out of the affairs of these rules. Go ahead.
There's also the connection, which he was talking about when you're talking about church and the state in the Byzantine Empire. They're Greek Orthodox, and they had a lot of beef with the Vatican and the Catholics, a lot, you know. I mean, like, head to head. They did have each other's backs, so to say, which is probably more about money in the Crusades. But overall, like, they disagreed on almost everything. And you see that in Prague as well, where the Vatican was like, we gotta do something here. Like, these guys are going wild, you know. Like, we can't have this. I know that they claimed that Rudolf was possessed. You know, that was hilarious. And they would say the same thing about the Byzantine emperors, you know, that they're like heathens, they're heretics, and the stuff they're doing almost exactly the same sort of Christianity. So
Can you pull up real quick, Romy?
I just want to touch on that real quick, because that's a great point, Brother Longo, that, you know, like, if you find any podcast on Rudolf II, even like alchemical stuff, all they're going to do is bash, because they focus a lot on the exoteric types of stories of this, you know, because, you know, we have this papal history or what have you. Like, I mean, granted, there are the stories. Okay, I heard a story that in the powder room, where they were doing a lot of the alchemical practices, that he not only starved the alchemists, but he then later hung them in cages and then let their bodies decompose on top of the bears that he had underneath the garden of the of the powder room, which is nuts, you know.
Listen, I wouldn't put it past this guy. This guy had lions in his palace, and there are records of settlements he had to do with people because they got bit or hurt from these animals. Okay, so would I put it past him that he was doing some heinous thing, like how you're saying? Bro, I mean, we can't put it past them. I mean, these are the lizard people that we talk about. These are the elites that we talk about all the time, that we reference. I mean, he was part of it. Now, he was a little bit more open-minded than the regular lizard person, but he nonetheless was a powerful elite of his time. So
the reason that he was so open-minded, and that's another thing people don't touch on much. He was saying in other videos, you don't really hear, like, how did this happen? You know, why is this guy, you know, not just a good Catholic, you know, Holy Roman Emperor who's just like holding hands with the Pope? Why is he, you know, locking people in towers and doing alchemy, all this stuff? The reason is because when he was a child, he was sent to be educated in Spain by another Habsburg, who's Philip II. He was the king of Spain at the time. And they said, all right, Rudolph.
And this is a picture of him, by the way, a very young Rudolph II. Yeah. This is a picture of him.
And they said, go to Spain, hang out with Uncle Philip, and he'll show you how to be a good king. Well, a good king at that time, a good Catholic king, was to be an inquisitor. It was the Inquisition. And so a young Rudolph is watching his uncle literally have people, torn limb for limb for doing these things. And so, of course, one, that's going to make him say, okay, well, there might be something here. Like, why are they so upset? Why can't I look into this stuff? So, of course, he's going to want to look into it.
It was fun to them.
Yeah. And the second thing is that when he actually becomes emperor, you see a historical amount of religious tolerance. They didn't really care in Rudolphian Prague if you're Jewish or Muslim or, if you're into some demonology or whatever it is. They're just like, let's go for it. And that's because he didn't want to be like his uncle, like his family. He saw how that ends, people just getting ruthlessly tortured, which I guess he did anyway, according to the stories, but maybe
well,
not.
it was only when he wasn't getting the alchemical answers he wanted, right? Like he wouldn't do it to the normal people. Apparently, he paid great respects to everybody in Prague. He was great to his people. He wouldn't burn people at the stake. He had, there was justice in the land. If you didn't
people were coming to him in order to try to sell him their art and try to get on his court, because he was known as this guy that would give people chances, and he quite literally made artists what they are today. I mean, it was because of their work with Rudolph II. So absolutely, if you want to scroll down,
if you did not turn the lead into gold in 24 hours, I will hang you above the bears to decompose you, fucking wannabe alchemist swine.
Hang you from your sack, bro. Can you imagine that torture, dude? Oof. If you don't get this homunculus made by 12 o'clock today, there will be hell to pay, okay? Little Romy, alchemical, whatever you are, a little leprechaun. You scroll down real quick to show a young, what was he? Probably, how old was he there? He was a young man, I guess he was.
Yeah. Well, look, his tip got smaller, right?
He's looking fresh, bro. Look at that outfit, though, dude. Look at
really grew into the cup.
As he's younger, it got, and as he gets older, it got smaller. That's very.
Yo, would you rock that though? Would you rock that outfit? Yo, zoom out real quick. Would you rock that?
Mad swag. I'd be there.
Yo,
Clean.
I would rock that, bro. Let me see the shoes. You got the shoes in there?
No shoes, unfortunately.
You got the Jordans in there? All right.
You know what I thought was interesting too, because there's some pictures up above, like when, I don't know, it's probably not anything to really like dig on too much, but when they decide to wear the hat and when they don't decide to wear the hat.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't really know, because I mean, hats play a big part in magical history. I mean, like the crown is obviously, has all of its properties, has alchemical and energetic properties as well. But the Phrygian cap, they said that one of the things that these alchemists would do to reform from being locked in the powder room or what have you in the lab is that they shaved off their beard, because some of the belief was to be a true alchemist, you had to have a full beard. You cannot do proper alchemy without the mystical beard on your face. So I don't know. Like, I feel like there is something I've always wanted to dig into. I want to do an episode at some point on the history of spectacles, glasses, and in the history of hats. For some reason, that like in a nerdy way, that sounds really fun and interesting to me. But
well, get me in there, bro. I did an episode on the Copio Cipher, which was a secret society of optometrists. They were with the sleight of hand, that was their code there. So yeah, the all-seeing eye is a big thing. So it would make sense that these spectacles were probably how you're saying any OG wizard, Gandalf, or any stereotypical wizard always has that beard, right? Always has that long beard. And how you're saying, maybe it was part of the, right? They would pluck a hair out and just throw it into the brew to see if they would get some more gold out of the projection that they were doing or whatever it was. Yeah, dude, absolutely. I like that.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. And in this one, he is wearing his hat. He's a lot older in this picture here. This is a very famous painting of him. He's got,
Yeah, that's like the OG painting that everybody. Well,
and
not that one. I think it was the Archambault one, right? It was the one.
they didn't hesitate. Oh, the Vertumnus.
Yeah.
They didn't hesitate to put the bags under his eyes, which I always find interesting. If you want a painting of you kind of like be like, clean up my flaws a little bit. But there's something about Longo. What's up with this thing around their neck? Is that part of the Order of the Golden Fleece, or it's something I can't remember. I heard it in a presentation, and I tried to dig into it, but there's just so much stuff I couldn't get into it in time. But what is
I don't know that one, to be honest. That's a good question, though. I don't know where that came from.
You just wouldn't know style, Romy. I mean, that's a turtleneck, obviously, and I mean, it's a fly ass turtleneck, so that's what the dude was just trying to be fly. Dude, you got swagger. I mean, bro, if you were the most powerful man in the world at the time, and and you could go and call anybody to come, I want whatever piece. I want the Holy Grail, bro. Find me the Holy Grail.
Yep.
And bring it to me. And put it in my cabinet of curiosities, right? Come on, I mean, this dude was balling out.
Well, let's get into that very, very soon. I feel like we should definitely start diving into that because he had a fleet of secret agents or knights that he had working for him. Now, remember what we said, right? We know that there was. At one point, the Knights Templars may or may not have actually worked for the Pope, and that's who gave them their original power before they broke away. But the Holy Roman Empire didn't work for the Pope. They were not involved in that, known to the Golden Bull rule. So there was another sect of secret knights and secret agents that were working for Rudolf to go and get him these things that he wished. And we're not talking just paintings. We're talking minerals. We're talking coral. We're talking precious. Bro,
this guy had the guy who invented mineralogy in his court. The dude was in his court, like the guy who invented the study of minerals. I mean, and you know about minerals, Longo. I know you do the crystals and anything. Do you have anything to add on that?
Well, there's an interesting thing, intersection between crystals and Prague. So really powerful crystal by all accounts is moldavite. Yes. And moldavite is used in alchemy very frequently. It's some believe it could be a philosopher's stone. Some others believe that the emerald tablets were written on moldavite because moldavite is extraterrestrial. So it is glass from meteors. So moldavite and tektite are both meteoric. They come in on
we're cooking with gas, baby.
And if you go to, like crater sites, you can find moldavite and tektite and things like that. And Prague itself is in the Czech basin, which was formed, like the whole geography or topography of Prague and the surrounding areas is a big bowl. Because a meteor struck there. However, I don't know, they say like 2 billion years or whatever, but who cares? A meteor struck there at some point and formed where Prague is. Mm-hmm. So it's actually sitting on top of a crater. And in the very sand and soil of Prague, there are traces of moldavite. So there is this like extraterrestrial glass, alchemical crystal in the actual foundation of the city itself. That's all I'd have to say, but it's really interesting.
That
real quick, because you're touching on something that it's very interesting. It's part of Vincent Bridges' research. And remember the golem of Prague. Well, the reason that they said that they were able to make this because this prima materia, I believe it was called, was in the soil. So that's why there were all these alchemists flocking to Prague because they're like, yo, it's in the soil, bro. Like it's in here. So Rudolf was also, go ahead.
It's moldavite.
Yes. I didn't know the name, but it makes a lot of sense because there's always been this argument of the red powder of projection that Edward Kelly had. And where did it come from? Well, allegedly it was found through the use of the Voynich manuscript and this magical creature that he summoned using the Voynich manuscript to find this powder, the red powder of projection, which I've always said is some sort of meteorite, some extraterrestrial stone. That's why they were never able to reproduce the transmutation of lead into gold, because they ran out of it and they couldn't. And now the stone at Mecca was supposedly stolen at one point, and when it was returned, it was 60% smaller. So the lure goes that they broke it down and they distributed that powder, you know, to their the underground, the alchemical homies. Because I would do that too. If I stole something, I'd break it down, ship some to Romy, I'd ship some to Longo, and we'd all transmute this gold baby. Because you know what I'm talking about. But Rudolf was one of the first emperors really to use crystals, right? He was using crystals, and he was using them as some sort of talismans. He would keep, I forgot which is the one that he would keep close to his heart, because I believe that it gave him, I don't know, his heart better beating. I don't know a lot about crystals, but I'm sure you could elaborate, Longo, whatever stone is good for your heart. He was into astrology, he was into alchemy, and there was even talks about how his chamber was connected to a secret alchemical lab, which he would sneak to at night in order to try to
true. He did have his own personal laboratory for alchemy. Absolutely. Yeah, he was working firsthand. You know, he wasn't just hiring people. He wanted to get in there.
Go ahead.
Yo,
Ronnie.
the chats are popping off right now, by the way. If we want to pay a little homage to you got Mars Pop that commented on the ruffles, said the lace ruffles that wore back then were discovered have been dipped in arsenic and other conductive solutions. Maybe it wasn't just fashion, but an electroconductive purpose. Order the golden fleece, right? And then someone said Moldavite puts off crazy energy and can make you sick. Well, he was always sick. He could never get better, quote unquote.
Yes.
Let's see. The layout of Prague by Crypto Alchemist. The layout of Prague is geometrically aligned to the Max Star Citadel City on ley lines of telluric currents and electroculture attained architecture. And that's very true. And these next couple slides are paying homage to the history of Prague itself and how old and ancient Prague is, and how long that just modern archaeology says that humans.
So let me read this real quick. Because I found it here. It goes, Rudolf valued precious stones and crystals for their secret virtues, and he always carried one next to his heart to calm his palpitations, and inherited Habsburg weakness. His magical arsenal, which he increasingly drew on when normal methods to influence the course of history failed, included dried roots of mandrake. So they don't say exactly which one it was, but in this book, according to this book, the Magic Circle of Rudolf II, he did keep precious stones in that. What's the name? I always mess it up. The Globus Cruciger. Is that how you say it, Romy?
The Globus Cruciger. Yes.
He had in that crown that you pulled up at the beginning, he had diamonds in it, embedded in it, and he related to that because, again, this is during the Hermetic is very symbolic, right? They use symbols, they use images, so they were very big on that. And the reason for that was because he was, right, the emperor. He was the stone. He was the one and only. So he had stones that represented that in his crown, essentially. And if you pull that up again, bro, that was pretty baller. The staff that he had and the Globus Cruciger. Right?
Yeah, his crown jewels or his royal jewels were very next level. He wanted to imitate the crown of Charlemagne because they thought that they were family bloodline of Charlemagne, and so the crown of Charlemagne and the crown of Rudolph were almost hand in hand together. Yeah, look at these.
Yeah, it's baller, bro.
And if anybody has looked at some of my work on what we call antiquated transhumanism, where I kind of go into all of the crown jewels and the history of them and their potential conductive properties and how they were using them. This is the Holy Trinity right here, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. The scepter is an anagram for the word specter, which is ghost. The crown is obviously where the consciousness emits, and the Globus Cruciger is the mercurial solution. And, you know, it's, I mean, these are all, these are what we use in our modern technology to be able to transmit communications across the world, is these conductive materials. So to think that, you know, you would have highly alchemical solutions, because these were made by alchemists, right? They were made by jewelers of back in the day in the royal courts, and they were used for very specific properties, in my opinion. And then you can conduct that with the ancient architecture of sacred architecture and the throne, sitting in the throne, the chariot, the seat of intuition, the seat of power.
I have something on that as well. We can get into it here really quickly, but yeah, bro, if you were a bad homunculus, bro, I'd smack the shit out of you with this thing. I'd be like, little homie Romy is not been go pop, bro. I hit you right in the back of the head, bro.
I'm sorry.
Like,
I'm sorry.
And I'd whip it too with like my rib. Like, bro, what's up?
Yo, I want to read oh, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
No. Well, I wanted to bring up we'll leave it towards the end, his chair that was taken, because that's a talisman on its own, bro. The chair, that the throne that he had, that was later, right? They sacked the whole thing and installed it. But go ahead.
Well, we were talking about the red powder and this book that we all have and we've all read, and that's kind of, I think, where we were all joining, was on this book by Peter Marshall. I wanted to read the exact excerpt about one of his favorite alchemists in the circle that gave him some red powder, Michael Sendivogius. So Sendivogius said that he gained his alchemical knowledge from an alchemist called Alexander Satan of Scottish origin. Satan claims in 1602 to have visited the pilot Jacob Huassen in the Netherlands, whom he had saved the year before off the Scottish coast. In an alchemical experiment, he showed the seafarer how to transform lead into gold. He then traveled around Europe, visiting Italy, Switzerland, and Germany. In Freiburg, he convinced the skeptical Professor Jeinheim of the possibility of manufacturing gold with the help of a magic powder. Several documents claim that he performed the transmutation in Germany, in Cologne. He even used the lapis lazuli as his first substance in the alchemical process. When Christian II, the Elector of Saxony, heard of his skill and knowledge, he had him arrested and tortured, but the Scot refused to reveal any of his secrets. Allegedly, Sendivogius helped Satan escape from prison. He survived only another couple years, but it was long enough for him to bequeath some of his magic red powder to his savior. Sendivogius is said to have not only married Satan's widow, but to have borrowed some of his writings in his most celebrated work, The New Chemical Light, published simultaneously in Prague and in Frankfurt. In Prague, Sendivogius was reputed to have transmuted gold for Rudolf in his laboratory, suspecting that the red powder might contain the seed of gold. Rudolf had some of it tested and was delighted to find that it contained none. It was indeed a catalyst, but as with all known alchemical experiments which claim to produce gold, the experiment could not be exactly repeated, as the conditions were so variable. Sendivogius claimed that Satan had not given him the right formula to create more powder before he died.
Damn, son. Somebody said, and how do you spell that guy's name? You said Sate?
Sendivogius, so Sendivogious.
It was at Satan, almost like Satan. Is that what?
Yeah. Shit, I just lost the page. Yeah, Satan, Seton. Alexander Satan.
Interesting. Just interesting name, right? That's all I'm saying. But
yeah, very much.
Somebody said no Infinity Gauntlet, and then somebody said missing the pimp cup. Well, he actually, I have here pulled up from his uncle. He at last managed to acquire, because his uncle had passed, and he also had a cabinet of curiosities. Acquired two of his father's treasures, which he most coveted. One was the large bowl of precious agate. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. Found in 1204 by the Crusaders during the conquest of Constantinople, which had the name of Christ in the vein of the stone. Rudolf believed that it was none other than the Holy Grail, and was convinced that by drinking from it, he would be filled with holiness and good health. This he did in private, and found its effects was always positive. And then he also had this, this was my favorite one, a 6-foot long unicorn's horn. probably a narwhal horn, which allegedly bestowed special powers on its owners. During his increasing bouts of melancholy, Rudolf would often take both objects and draw a magical circle around him with a special Spanish sword in order to protect himself against the baneful influences of his enemies. So, homeboy in private was doing some magical rituals, drinking from the Holy Grail, and he said he felt good. So yeah, the pimp cup was definitely strong with Rudolph II because this dude was doing stuff. Longo,
No
you have
doubt.
anything?
What'd you say?
You have anything to add?
No, I mean, you guys covered it. You know, it was he was definitely partaking in the dark arts. You know, he like we said earlier, he had a laboratory, but firsthand, this guy like he wanted to get in on everything. He had all the money in the world. He had all the, like you guys touched on, nights to go find things. You know, I mean, he had it all, and he wanted to do it all. And you know, I don't know how it ended up. I wish we had like diaries or something, you know, or something
Yeah.
to hear his firsthand takes on it all, you know, how it went, or what he liked, what he didn't like, you know, what worked, what didn't work, because we have no idea, unfortunately. And it would be nice to know, you know, because well, I guess nowadays you can get a lot of the stuff that he had. So, you know, like finding all those stones and stuff now, you can just go to any store and they have lapis lazuli and, you know, moldavite and things. But I don't know.
He was indeed linked with John Dee, and we'll get to that here in a little bit, and Edward Kelly. So here's a question for you, Longa. I want to get your opinion on this, because he was known for his taste in the arts, right? He was very artsy, and he had all the greatest painters and alchemists and everybody that you could possibly think of during this time. Would that indicate that he himself was an artist, or do you think that he outsourced this stuff in order to fill that void that he had because he couldn't create this art? You know what I'm saying? Because there's always been that debate, like, was he himself an artist? Was he a writer? Was he, you know, an alchemist? Because it seems like he really didn't do much of anything, except there's stories of him sitting down in front of the painters and kind of micromanaging everybody, because they were essentially working for him full time as artists, doing whatever it was that he wanted them to paint.
Right. Yeah, I think he was pretty decadent. You know, he grew up as an uber wealthy, spoiled kid, and maintained that throughout his whole life. So I don't think that he was an artist. At least I haven't seen anything pertaining to that. But he was definitely a patron of the arts. And a lot of, you know, the Renaissance mindset was that instead of being an artist and doing the hard work yourself, you should use your money and sort of make the world a better place through art, you know, or try to find God through art, that sort of thing, or to pay it forward, you know. And that's what most of them did. I mean, they had everything else, you know. He had a palace and everything, but he was collecting unbelievable works. I mean, stuff that's absolutely priceless now, like Durr engravings, the German engraver, Raphael. You know, I mean, he didn't have any Michelangelo that I know, but things of that caliber, you know, Renaissance artists, contemporary artists that are absolutely priceless. He had tons of them, rooms full of these. And
he
that
was
was kind
obsessed with Dürer, yeah.
What is that?
He was obsessed with Dürer.
Oh yeah, with Dürer, yeah, absolutely. I like him too, so I can't blame him. Yeah, but you know, he kind of, his function was not to do things himself. It was sort of to be a curator, almost like a museum curator. And that was the first in the world, first of its kind. And it sort of helped to spark the Renaissance, really, because people could come to one place and get paid pretty well. I mean, he's paying these guys, you know, big money for the most part, and have all of these things from all over the world at their disposal in one place, which previously could not be done. You know, you could have some things, but this guy was like laying it out in front of you, just like, you know, here's all these stones, here's all these grimoires, here's all this art, you know, figure it out, kind of thing. And I don't think that had ever been done in history, not at least from what I've read. And that sort of is the spirit of the Renaissance, is to explore everything, just go wild on it,
We have here, Rudolph's passion for collecting was by no means limited to the realm of painting. Throughout his adult life, he collected rare and exotic items, which he appreciated for their aesthetic value as much as their scientific interest, ranging from precious metals and stones to works of art and instruments of science. He entertained no firm distinction between their artistic and useful aspects. Rudolph appreciated, for instance, the art involved in glyptics, the cutting and engraving of gems, but he also employed gems as talismans with astral powers. He was particularly drawn to natural oddities and rarities, to those objects which lay on the borderline between the human and the natural world. So again, you could literally go to Prague and to let the listeners know, he went from, where did he move it from? Because I forget, was it Vienna?
Vienna.
Right, he moved it from Vienna to Prague. Yeah. So after he became the Holy Grail.
By the way, that kind of gets glossed over, but how big of a deal that is. Mm-hmm. Vienna was it. That Vienna is where you have all the stately things, the architecture, classical music, things like that. Vienna was, and he just ups and moves, and this guy became emperor at 24 years old.
And wasn't the title also like made up, kind of, sort of? Did I read that correctly? Where they gave him this title, but it wasn't like an official title at the time. Did I read into that correctly?
When he was a kid, you mean?
Yeah, when they.
No, his father Maximilian was, after he died, he was the oldest of the male children, so he was given the proper rights. Okay,
I'm fake news then, yeah.
But he loved Prague. He went to Prague when he was younger, and like Longo brought up earlier, he despised the way that the church was moving towards just massively killing anybody who stood in their way, and most likely had some occulted uncle or somebody that he valued and cherished, that was able to give him some sort of like insider alchemical knowledge that really got him seeking in these arts. I couldn't find anything, but there's always an inspirational family member or somebody that kind of like was his role model. But Prague was very much so in his plans. Like, I think he had always wanted to move to Prague, and so when he did that, it was a huge deal. And but what happened was, I don't know if we should get into this part until later, because the part the ending of his life was very.
No, go ahead and continue the slide show here, and then we'll get into the end of his life.
Okay, Roger. Okay, so some prehistory on Prague. The land where Prague came to be built has been settled since the Paleolithic age, several thousand years ago. Trade routes connecting southern and northern Europe passed through this area, following the course of the river. From around 500 BC, the Celtic tribe known as the Boii were the first inhabitants of this region known by name. The Boii gave their name to the region of Bohemia and near the river Vltava. The Germanic tribe, the Marcomanni, migrated to Bohemia with its king, Maroboduus, in the year 9. Meanwhile, some of the Celts migrated southward, while the remainder assimilated toward the Marcomanni. In 568, most of the Marcomanni migrated southward with the Lombards, another Germanic tribe, which is like a huge name in the States, and like most cities have a Lombard street, which is interesting. The rest of the Marcomanni assimilated with the invading West Slavs, the migrations of the nations. According to legend, Princess Labruse, the sovereign of the Czech tribe, married a humble plowman by the name of Primsil, and founded the dynasty carrying the same name. The legendary princess saw many prophecies from her castle Libdusin, which was located in central Bohemia. Archaeological finds dating back to the 8th century support the theory of this castle's location. And one prophecy, it is told that she foresaw the glory of Prague. And one day she had a vision. I see a vast city whose glory will touch the stars. I see a place in the middle of a forest where a steep cliff rises above the Vitava River. There is a man who is chiseling the threshold for the house. A castle named Prague will be built there. Just as the princess and duke stoop in front of the threshold, they will blow to the castle and the city around it. It will be honored and favored with great repute, and praise will be bestowed upon it in the entire world.
They will bow to the castle, so, and the city around it. You said blow or not? I mean, I'm sure they're blowing stuff too, but you know what I mean. You know, so that story that you just read, I remember Vincent Bridges talking about how about this story, and I was never able to find it. Right? I was never able to locate it, and now it needs citations, obviously, but right from We Keep Ideas. Shout out to Slick Dissident in the chat, but yeah, that story of how it was made for this king's daughter or something or other, and it had some sort. I also heard it was put that there was a natural magical circle, and I think that's what you're getting at there. The archaeologists in Prague uncover ancient 7,000-year-old Neolithic structure. So is that what they found? Did they find like some sort of circle?
Look at it. Boom.
I can't see it. Oh wow. Whoa. Okay. That's
So
wild.
think about that. Just think about this story for a second. How actually beautifully prominent that is to the relevance of everything that we're talking about. So talking about Moldavite, talking about spiritual qualities, talking about ley lines, talking about geomagnetics, talking about crystals and mineral structure. She said a city that will touch the stars. It did.
Oof.
It had the most prominent astronomers and astrologers in history that landed there, that built observatories there.
Mhm.
She quite literally might have been channeling some sort of timeline thing. And maybe that's what a lot of this occultic esoteric knowledge is being able to tap into the earth and energies to be able to see the past, the present, and the future. And, you know, the syncretic overlords are kind of just wiping that away, putting their homes on top of that so that they can control the present, the future, and so on and so forth. I mean, obviously it's a stretch, but I mean, that's kind of where I go with it.
And that's why I was so excited about this episode. I called you and I was like, yo, let's go to Prague, bro. What's that? we were even looking up like how much the tickets cost to go to Prague. And I was like, yo, I can't go for like 2 weeks though. You're like, come on, you can at least go for 10 days. I'm like, yo, let's go they have an alchemist alley. So it's like, it was a place where these alchemists were just hanging out, bro. And they should
Golden Lane is what it's called.
Let's go to Prague.
Let's go.
Let's go. Dude, it's magical.
Franz Kafka lived on Golden Lane, which is where all the alchemists live. Like, people can still live in those houses, at least back in his day. And Kafka lived there, which is pretty interesting, you know. And someone in the chat mentioned Franz Bardone, and he is Czech. I think they were asking. I don't know if they're... Franz Bardone, he's like a magician, hermeticist. He wrote some really, really good books. They're expensive, collectible books.
Well, you would know about that, right? You do rare books. I didn't see that comment. Yeah, we have a whole bunch of people in the chat. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Got over 100 people in the chat. So
if everybody in the chat just donated a quick $33,
$33,
we could be going to Prague right quick.
You could fund a little homunculus's trip to Prague, and we'd be in the underground caves, right, in this lab, recording a podcast right now. What's that, right? Trying to transmute the lead into gold. I mean, it would be such a great time. But yeah, dude, for real, I want to take a trip one of these days to somewhere magical, and I think Prague would be the place, bro. But absolutely, I agree with you 100%. I think that's something that's overlooked. And I remember when you and I first got together and started doing research, you were real big on architecture, and I was just like into the occult. And then when my research crossed streams with your research, when it finally got into the talismanic, amulet, et cetera, realm of things, where you're like, yo, you can charge an entire building and use it as a talisman. Well, extrapolate that even bigger. You can use an entire city as a talisman, right? The implications, and it makes you think of why the biggest cities are always in a line, right? Where all these, Washington D.C. isn't there just because. No. The people who built these cities and that go back hundreds of years, they know this. They know they can tap into the earth itself and use it for their magical abilities of whatever nature that they want. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're absolutely right about that. And the fact that they found this, what is it, a circle, or did they have an actual structure there, bro? Do you have any more information on that?
No, it had been flattened. I mean, it clearly suffered some sort of like deluge or of sorts. I mean, they got the remnants of it, the base shape. But it's still being dug. I mean, you know how archaeology works. It's like, you're lucky that we even got that, right? They're lucky that we were even able to see the very basic structure that was.
Yeah.
But real quick to touch on that, thinking about these different powers that be and their different goals and things, and how unique Rudolf was with his purpose and what he was trying to do with his goals. Shout out to the classic, the OG Tracy Twyman, and her putting together the brilliant books explaining how money is an alchemical process. It's a philosopher's stone of creating nothing, gold out of nothing, essentially taking the thaler of back in the day to a dollar that we have now, and quite literally creating this gold coin. He was not about that. He didn't care about money. He didn't actually care about creating gold. I don't believe so, because gold is the philosopher's gold is different than tangible physical gold. They said that he had 7 million coins, golden coins, unused in a chamber that they found just chilling, that he not even touched. He did not care about money. He cared about something a lot deeper, because a lot more of these hermetic mysteries, these ancient mysteries, and I wouldn't be surprised if he in fact knew about this ancient civilization that was there, he maybe even heard about this old story prophecy that he needed to fulfill the legacy of Prague to enact the actual purpose of the ancient civilizations, that there's always been a constant battle potentially. I don't know, but he was very much so trying to do some shit, and I am fucking pissed. I am pissed. Anyways, I like downgraded on my speech there, but here we are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Shout out to Occultist Lux there. Everybody go follow his channel. He does some great stuff. We have an episode coming.
I definitely think, like you're saying, he was aware of prehistory and the history of Prague. It was no accident. This guy had all the power and money in the world, and he chose Prague. And we touched on it earlier that it's literally in the soil. There's moldavite in the soil. It's constructed on a crater site, extraterrestrial
which would make sense.
Objects are struck there,
Which would make sense on what either you or Romy was talking about, how he went to, what was it, Philip, his uncle, Philip?
Yeah.
And maybe they revealed to him some alchemical secrets, perhaps, or I don't know, something even more supernatural. Maybe he was visited by, right, the Paracelsian Elias Artista, right, the immortal alchemist. Maybe, who knows? Because this dude, and we can get into speculations after the fact, but I mean, when you have everything that you could possibly want, what you would want, and this is me speaking, this is my opinion. If I have everything that's material in this material realm, materiality itself, whatever, the money, he had women, he had a collection of dwarfs because he thought that they were magical. He had lions and tigers roaming around his palace because that's baller, bro. It's like some Mike Tyson stuff right there. Like, you just have a lion and a tiger just roaming around. It's like, oh, you bit your leg off? Here's 1,000 gold coins. Get out of here, right? You would want the next thing. And I think that's why he was involved in all this metaphysical stuff. He would want immortality. Well, what does the Philosopher's Stone give you? Immortality. Not only does it give you endless riches, because you can turn everything from lead to gold, or you turn everything to gold, but you could also transcend this dimension, quite literally. So the fact that he was drawing magical circles with his little unicorn horn and drinking from the Holy Grail and doing all this stuff in secret, I mean, dude, he wanted that next level, right? The next, he wanted to transcend this dimension and live forever, probably.
Oh, absolutely, no doubt.
Rudolf
Yes.
Steiner, another Rudolf.
Yep.
Rudolf Steiner says the Philosopher's Stone is carbon.
Is carbon?
Yeah. And he thinks that basically that you can become a breatharian, where all you do is breathe in oxygen and you keep the carbon inside of you. So when you breathe out, it's like some kind of pure air if you get to these purified states.
Interesting.
And it crystallizes inside of you, basically, like a diamond or something.
That's like Wim Hof type of stuff where they do the breathing exercises. Yeah, it would make sense.
Well, and then if you look at the ancient Eastern mysticism of yoga and these practices of really diving in, it's breath practices. I 100% love that. Rudolf Steiner, shout out. Maybe potentially slightly racist, still great. It's real great work. I have a slide later and we'll get into that, but it really touches on what you just said. That if the carbon is the philosopher's stone, then the elixir of life is oxygen.
Sure.
And when they were able to extract oxygen, and one of the famous people of the court created the very first submarine, which we'll get into later. I don't want to ruin that slide. I just want to say this.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
I just want to say this one weave real quick. Okay. You have this line of Ferdinands, you have this line of Rudolphs, you have this line of Maximilians, right? And it's all Habsburgian blood, it's all Brabantian blood, it's all royal blood. Okay. It led all the way up onto, let's talk about World War I. So the next in succession. So I had all this stuff. Like, I'm not going to read all this shit. I've been reading so much, but like, we're going to jump. Like, there's been Rudolphs, there's been Ferdinands, there's been Fredericks, there's been all these people that are harnessing the archetype of their family name. Right. Let's jump into the 20th century when this bloodline actually finally started to seize on itself. And I found this to be really interesting because it seems to be an ongoing battle of something that has almost been procured for almost thousands of years. So in the 20th century, in the next succession of the Austro-Hungarian throne was Francis Ferdinand, d'Este, after the crown. The Prince Rudolf, the son of Emperor Francis Joseph I, had committed suicide, and after the emperor's brother Ferdinand's father had died, Ferdinand, related to Jagiellon, Luxembourg, was married to Sophie von Chotek from a Czech aristocratic family. They lived in Bohemia in the Konopiste castle, not far from Prague. He was in favor of a triple monarchy, expanding an Austro-Hungary dualism and the Austro-Hungary Czech triple monarchy. On June 28, 1914, he and his wife were assassinated. The assassination led to World War I. World War I ended with the defeat of the Austro-Hungarian Empire with the help of this guy, Tomas Masaryk, who was going around the world to try to find political support. I find that really interesting that you have this ongoing theme of esotericism and occult and this deeper knowledge connected to the Rudolf and the Ferdinand, the Habsburgian bloodline. And then that final capstone being pushed off and the assassination of them leading to the World War I. And then we know that World War II was a very occult war as well. And so it's just, and then we find ourselves in now. Now we find ourselves up to modernity. We jumped from the Renaissance period where you're having all of this massive influx of science and alchemy and the royal bloodlines feuding with each other. Like Juan said earlier, this live action Game of Thrones actually 100%. Happening. And then you have the consolidation of power to the reality that we exist in now. Ended with that. Like that was always trying to be decapitated. And I haven't really put together a full weave on that, but what do you guys think about that? I find that really fascinating.
Real quick, bro. The votes are in. I went ahead and I asked my side if homie Romy is a homunculus. We had 20 votes, 90% yes that you
You're right.
are a homunculus. So shout out to the chat. I'm sorry, bro. I had it.
Who is his homunculus master is the real question.
Who created me? Who's my pop?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
bro.
what is my goal?
To spread the truth? I don't know, bro.
Well, hell yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your fucking votes, you fucks. I love you all.
Real quick, bro. Hold on. This is my favorite one here. Homunculus. What you're getting at, because you're making me think, right? The 30 Years' War happened after Rudolph, right after his spoiler alert, his brother strips him of all his titles and everything, and he dies alone and powerless, except with an empty title. But this 30 Years' War, how you're saying, was kind of sort of occultic in nature, and then you have World War I, and then World War II. I say World War II was more occult in nature than anything else, right? Because we have the N-word, the not that N-word, but the NAZIs. I'm not going to say it for the algorithm, but those N-words, they were trying to, they say that they had this technology and that they were trying to, right, they had extraterrestrial technology, or they had secret societies, or maybe they had some alchemical technology.
They took Prague, too.
They took Prague. So maybe perhaps they knew the significance of this area, and they needed to hold it for whatever reason. I mean, but what I really love about this is that you see the sort of mirroring, right? History doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. And I think that these elites know that. I think that's what this is all about not only mirroring history, like these significant events that happen. For example, I think this is why we all kid around about the homunculus being like this. I always talk about it, but I think that the homunculus is important because if you're able to put in that talisman, the spirit of this ancient deity, and sacrifice it and replay an event in history, right? Like you have all these stories of two brothers fighting with one another. Well, what if you can do that today? What sort of powers would that bring you today, right? Unless it's symbolic and alchemical, et cetera, et cetera. But the point that you're able to reenact these plays and these stories that some scriptures are based off of, right? Like, I mean, you have Cain and Abel, right? You have a whole religion that really talks about that story. And I think that replaying these things over and over again in history, because you have Rudolph, right? The brother against his other brother, right? One betrays the other. So you have this opposing party. Again, this is just me thinking outside the box, but I think you're right, Romy. That's what I'm thinking about right now, about the repeating of history through how you're saying, like this weird alchemical connection that's kind of sort of there, but not really. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
a fractal.
30 Years' War, 1618, right? World War I was 1914, but we had the Spanish flu in 1918. So you have 300 years gap in that, and then we had in 2018, 2019, of the starting of our virus or whatever here, and then the 100 Years' War, which is, it slowly was a gradual thing, but that was also 200 years before the 30 Years' War. And it's just like, it's almost on a rhythm of like these patterns. And these guys wrote this great book called The Fourth Turning. Neil Howe and his co-author wrote this great book where they kind of broke history down into these segments and saw how these cyclical patterns were just, I don't know if they were like archetypally fed through just, I don't know. It's so deep. That's not what this conversation's about, because we should dive into that a lot deeper. Because I'm so caffeinated, I'll just start spitting shit and everybody's going to think I'm just an idiot. So I don't really want to go too much on that. But please, I didn't mean to cut you off, Sir Longo. Please continue.
I don't remember what I was saying.
Damn it. I'm sorry. I'm such a dick.
Right. But the 30 Years' War was actually a result of Rudolph being too religiously tolerant. He had too much tolerance.
Yeah.
you know, when you let people be that free religiously out in the open, they start butting heads really quick. You know, they don't keep it at home. They're not like, oh, you know, I'll be a Protestant at home, and you know, when I'm in public, I won't talk about it. Now all of a sudden they're like, no, we're building a church next to your church. You know, like Rudolph said it was fine. You know, like that kind of thing. And then they're just going at it. You know, and so it actually ended up rising or raising religious tensions, because of his sort of lax attitude towards religion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It does make sense. And that's why they say, even though the 30 Years' War happened, you know, 6 years after his death, or, you know, it was still technically his fault, because wars just don't happen overnight. You know, they do take a few years to truly kind of like go on. But look at where we're at in society when, you know, just talking at the point that you just brought up, like we have churches next to churches, you know, everybody's out here speaking their freedom. And I think that that's almost set up to fail on its own. As this system is very inevitably set up to fucking fail, right? Stealing our illusion, what have you. And gosh, you know, I just want to stick to the mystical stuff, because
let's go.
All right, let's look at his collection. We haven't even talked about his Kunstkammer. I just butchered that word or anything.
Kunstkammer, but it's all right. But let me touch on this real quick, because, and let me pull up the chair, because I thought it was beautiful. But the idea that during this time there was this phenomenon of having your little own microcosm to the macro, your reflection of your hobbies, and how we talked about there was there was ones with dried up chameleons, and there was even some collections that, right, the cabinets of curiosities. Well, we just had that show on Netflix with Del Toro, Cabinet of Curiosities. Well, that comes from this era, from the 16th century and really on, where people were storing these crazy collections. Even the regular person had their own collection. Now, zoom out, and a guy like Rudolph had an entire palace full of things, where he would go in there, and not only did it serve as some microcosm to his macro, but it also served as a museum, right? It was sectioned off, and these certain sections were for certain things. So you had this entire collection of not only magical things, but also it talked about history, and it talked about, there was some collections with even human bones and human body parts that I read, right? They would go and they're like, hey, this person died of whatever. It's like, well, let me get his finger bone right there. And then they would just take the finger bone, and they took it as a souvenir for wherever they were at, wherever they were traveling. But Rudolph, again, would tell his people to acquire things for him. Like, hey, go and find XYZ for me and bring it here. And so Rudolph II's Kunstkammer was one of the most diverse of its times, and it was obviously plundered after the fact. Let me pull up here I have his chair, which was also stolen, but I found it really, really crazy looking.
Yeah, they were starting to ransack Prague during the war, and they, like, thankfully, some like-minded people got a lot of those beautiful things from Prague and put them into museums and things, and
like the Voynich manuscript.
Yeah, exactly.
What was it? The Giga Codex or something like that? The Codex Giga or something? What was that?
Codex Giga, right. Yeah. Rudolph gave the Voynich manuscript as a gift to, I think it was a doctor or pharmacist in his court. Maybe it was some sort of doctor, like an herbalist or something. And they cured him of what was considered a grave illness, like he was going to die. And this guy brought him back, like from pretty bad. They didn't specify what it was. And he gave it to this dude. And from there, it went to that guy, another lawyer that was in his court. I think that the doctor died and gave it to this guy who was a lawyer. That guy gave it to some other dude, gave it to some other guy, and it ends up in Italy, in a library, like a sort of, I don't know if it's a university library, something along those lines. And then it ends up in the hands of the Jesuit order.
Are you talking about the Voynich or the Codex Giga?
Yeah, the Voynich. Yeah.
Oh,
And so it ends up in the Vatican. And this is where it gets weird, because it ends up from the Vatican. It disappears for like, I don't know, 150 years, something like that. It's just sitting there. And it ends up in the hands of Voynich, the guy where it gets his name from. It's his last name, in the 1800s. He's a bookseller. He's an antiquarian bookstore owner, rare book dealer. And somehow he was like getting books at auction from the Vatican, like these rare things. And he bought the Voynich manuscript. And from there we have like the direct lineage. It's like his children and stuff. I think his great grandson gave it to Yale or one of the universities. And yeah, but it's crazy. I mean, he was giving gifts out like that. Like, oh, thank you for curing me. Here's the Voynich manuscript, you know. Maybe you can read it. I don't know.
That sounds crazy to us today, right? Because we know of its significance after the fact, right? Hindsight's 2020. But do you think he really understood like what he had in his, probably not, right? I mean, if he was just giving it away, it's like, yeah, Romy, go ahead and take that. The Holy Grail, dude, just taking up space, but it's collecting dust. Go ahead and take it. I only use it at night when I'm trying to cure myself of, you know, my schizophrenic depressions and my manic episodes. But I love the way that he puts it here. So Rudolf also went out of his way to acquire mechanical objects with hidden properties. One of his most precious possessions, one of my favorites, was a bell decorated with magic symbols, which he reportedly used to call up the spirits of the dead. Rudolf was not only dazzled by bright and uncommon objects, but more extravagant the claims made for them, the more he held them dear. So again, people were just probably trying to sell him like whatever, like, yo, this is a homunculus, here, take this. He preferred to spend his time in the company of his artists and artisans rather than the ministers, ambassadors, and courtiers. As his desire for seclusion increased, the latest wonders of his Kunstkammer studios, workshops, and laboratories eventually became more important than the affairs of state. Although little more than an amateur, he loved to try his hand at watchmaking and inlaying, as well as at painting and drawing. So that answers our question there. At least he tried. Was he good? We don't know, but he at least tried watchmaking and all that stuff and alchemy. And he goes on here, the Kunstkammer certainly offered Rudolf a tranquil place to observe the works of nature and art as his hopes of universal peace for the Christendom collapsed. But it was much more than a simply solitary retreat from the world. As a repository of gifts, it played a role in his political activities. Giving gifts was a central part of diplomacy at the time. It also served as an emblem of his vision of the world and of himself as the earthly equivalent of Jupiter and the reincarnation of Augustus, responsible for their. So then here, let's see here. There was one part I wanted to read. Where is it? Anyways, yeah, his Kunstkammer, which was his collection of things. It served as his place where he could go and just kind of chill out, right? And
there are also magical amulets and talismans, things there where he could, you know, do his bidding with you will. If anybody's had, I would hope that everybody listening has some sort of altar in their home. You know, your home is your Kunstkammer. It is your cabinet of curiosities, and you should fill it with fun things. I mean, you know, skulls and bones and rocks and stuff like, and if you do that, and if you have this altar, what have you, and if you sit in front of it, it can be a very heightened spiritual experience for you. And I really suggest people go and sit with their breath in front of these things that you find special, and see what happens for you. See what type of like downloads you can get. It's a very wonderful and beautiful thing to take prized possessions and let them encompass you during your meditations.
And I have here, what fired Rudolf's mania for collecting in the first place, it provided an escape from the life of the court. He found his real solace not in the arms of his mistress Katrina or the other imperial women, but in the heavy silence of his Kunstkammer, where the ars magica of his collection occasionally worked its effects. He went to it like an opium addict to his pipe in order to escape the entanglements of this world and to imagine a more beautiful and harmonious realm where he really was Augustus and Macanus rolled into one. Secondly, there can be no doubt that Rudolf suffered from an acute sense of possessiveness Archduchess Maria. I'm not going to read that. But then here he goes, while this may have been part of his unconscious motivation, his collecting obsession was both intellectual and sensuous. His passion for art was intimately connected with for his passion for science. He wanted to penetrate beyond appearances and attain a vision of the ultimate nature of the universe. Hence his interest in the arcane sciences of alchemy and astrology, the occult, magic, and other speculative arts. He wished nothing less than to solve the riddle of existence, to foretell the future, and to find the key of immortality. Rudolf's Kunstkammer was not, therefore, just a random collection of curious items, nor was it merely for his private contemplation. It provided him and his court with a magic theater of the world, a distorting mirror of the universe. It was also more than one man's folly, for it offered a special source of learning for his growing band of seekers after truth by gathering together all aspects of available knowledge, arranged systematically according to their artistic, scientific, technical, and natural character. So, bro, this was like, even the homies could get it. Even the homies could come around and be like, yo, let's go and stare at your Holy Grail or the Spear of Destiny or whatever it was that you have in that room. Like, let's all go and learn about whatever you have. Again, it was the one of the first encyclopedias. I mean, museums. That was like an encyclopedia, right? Everything was broken down and cataloged. Now, we bring up the topic of Elias Ashmole, right? The Ashmolean Museum, and I
gave you that book.
Oh, you did, right? I have it back there, actually. Yeah. So he was one of the first people to establish, right, the first museum, essentially. Let me pull it up here. But he was kind of like a scumbag. His first, so the Ashmolean Museum, which coincidentally he's linked to, right, Bacon, John Dee, and all the greatest, right?
Which magical,
Bacon? Oh, the Francis Bacon. I mean, I think it was that Bacon, right? Baconian. He was real big on Baconian stuff. Let's see here. Anyways, he was linked to John Dee, and the Ashmolean Museum, Britain's first public museum. But the way he got that was through tricking this other guy into signing over. He's like, hey, let me catalog all your stuff, which was, the dude's name was John Tradescant the Elder. And he had, at the time, one of the greatest collections. Again, these people were collecting all these things. It included antique coins, books, engravings, geological specimens, zoological specimens, and one of which was the stuffed body of the last dodo ever seen in Europe. So the dodo bird was seen as, since it was a flightless bird, it was seen like, yo, I want one of those because it's a flightless bird. Like, it's like a paradox of some sort. But this guy, Elias Ashmole, he's like, yo, let me catalog everything for you, and we're gonna promote it, whatever, and then, it'll all be yours. But at the end of the day, he like hijacked the dude's collection and stole it, and then took over all his stuff, and then he opens up a museum. I was like, what in the world, bro? The Ashmolean Museum of Art and Archaeology. So its first building was erected in 1678 and 1683 to house the cabinet of curiosities that Elias Ashmole gave to the University of Oxford in 1677. Yikes. So
yikes.
Yeah, bro, this dude stole that collection from that guy, bro. He straight up stole it. It's wild to me.
I mean, that's what's just been happening, man. We just keep stealing things and putting names on it, claiming, claiming it's like, it's mine. Possession is not intention for loss. What's mine? Put my name on it now. Hurry, please write it down that it's mine. Like the classic John Dee Skrymir that was stolen famously from, the Pyramid of Mexico, one of the Pyramid of the Sun. It was like an obsidian, because obsidian is like a sacred stone to the ancient Aztecs. And, who gets credited for that? Not the South American culture, right? But none other than John Dee gets credited for having this mirror and invoking the Enochian archetypes. It's like, oh, okay, great. Not the actual people who created the mirror itself and its homeland, where it came from and where the obsidian was most likely harvested. You know, that's my biggest beef with Western esotericism and Western occultist is that it's a lot of times something that's been stolen or hijacked from something else, like most likely Eastern mysticism, you know, and it's just like, you know, it's great to talk about. I love it, but also at the same time, like, let's try to give homage to the roots as we're talking about these white fucks.
Yeah.
Yo.
There's a lot that's wild. I mean, even in contemporary stuff, if you go read, and I'm a big fan, but if you read Aleister Crowley, I mean, you just have to go in there knowing like half of it is stolen, like straight up. He just puts it. Yeah, I mean, you read like his sections on yoga, and they're just like Raja Yoga by Swami Vivekananda, almost word for word. If you read that book, it's the same exact instructions, the same stuff. And you could go on and on and on. There's so much that he took, which, you know, I mean, there's some service in that, you know, they're bringing it to a new audience and whatever, but they definitely don't give credit where credit's due.
Dude, yeah, never. Juan, what were you showing there? Was that the throne?
Yeah, that was the throne of the chair from the Kunstkammer of Emperor Rudolf II. And you saw that, let me pull it up again, the detail that is in this chair, bro. I mean, look at that. Look how crazy this chair. I believe this was a gift. I don't have the actual breakdown of the chair itself, but we have here the, check that out, dude. How crazy that chair is.
Damn.
Wow. Is it wood? Is it bronze?
So I have the whole thing here. I didn't actually read
Don't
it,
make them
but
like they used to.
they don't make
No.
them how they used to. Yeah, but again, it was stolen. It was stolen. So on the treasures house of the emperor has placed, was a chair which is described in the inventory prepared during the years of 1607 to 1611. So now property of Earl of Ranor of Longford Castle. So until in the last year of the 30 Years' War, so this is, you know, obviously after he had died, they went in there and they looted a whole bunch of the stuff, which was, again, much of the Habsburgs' treasure had already been removed to Vienna, but the chair was still in the palace and is listed in the inventory.
Which that sucks because it's like, you know, because he was a Habsburg, like there's obviously going to be some righteous you know, Habsburgian families that's like, well, that's mine because he was my brother. It's like, well, you didn't like him, you hated him. Why do you want his stuff? There's
that power, bro. That's what we were talking about earlier. That amulet or talisman value. It's like, you know, back then when they would take the heads of their enemies. Well, that was a sort of talisman as well. I mean, for those that were in the know, they're like, yo, if you have the head of whoever, you can have it prophesized to you or some sort of divination or whatever it was. But
By
yeah,
the way,
like,
Nostradamus did
his chart. I
a
forgot
natal chart, and so he did an astrological reading for Rudolph when he was a young boy, and that's just like, maybe that's how he got into it. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that. So yeah, you think of any of the greatest like minds of whatever, Nostradamus.
Yeah.
I mean, like, come on. I mean, this guy was surrounded by the best of the best of the time, and trying to find out here, read quickly. I didn't actually read this. I just saw it and I thought it was interesting. So
do your search, Control F.
what do you want me to look?
Well, whatever it is that you were looking for.
Oh, I was just reading it quickly. But yeah, how I got there is it can only be a matter of speculation. However, Rucker's first complaint mentions that it had disappeared with the intention of selling the chair. So I believe it was a gift from what I had read. And after that, it was just taken from him. But yeah, it's a crazy looking chair.
I was wondering when I was looking up the Voynich stuff if Dr. Seuss was influenced by the Voynich manuscript. You know, like this picture alone is very, very much reminds me of Dr. Seuss. I couldn't find obviously any specific stuff, but like Dr. Seuss was into some really interesting art. He had a whole subject of art that he would do at night. He called it his midnight art sessions.
Yeah.
That he would keep in his own Kunstkammer, if you will. And look at this, none other than the horned creatures. Yeah.
So I did an alchemical breakdown of Dr. Seuss with Mario from Symbolic Studies, the Kabbalistic Dr. Seuss, and how how Dr. Seuss had some sort of Kabbalistic meaning behind it, right? Of transcending the tree of life and the different sephirots, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
And the interesting thing about the Voynich manuscript, which I believe it was it you, Longo? I think it was Slick that told me about, or I think I was listening to Vincent Bridges talk about it, how he had seen it. The interesting thing about, because I call it interdimensional literature, and I coined that term on an episode that I did with Professor Longo, where we talked about these books that unlock maybe perhaps what Carl Jung talked about, the archetypes of reality, these symbols that exist behind the fabric of reality and influence us and the collective conscious, if you will, right? Well, the Voynich manuscript, from you reading it, from you being in the same room as this book, it invokes this feeling of, I think you get like lightheaded, or you start almost to like poison yourself. And there's some theories behind that. I saw Gabe called it a hyper sigil in the chat, but the other theories is that the actual pages of the book and the ink that was used contains some sort of toxin. So, you know, everybody licks their finger when they're flipping through the pages or whatever it is. Well, don't do that with the Voynich manuscript, because you might die and you're intaking some neurotoxin.
That is in itself, a magical practice. So if you look at something like the Ars Notoria, the Ars Notoria, I don't know if you know what that is, but that's
what's a magical practice? Licking your finger and turn the page?
No, that's hilarious. But a magical practice is writing on paper or on a leaf and then washing it off and drinking the water after you. So you write it out, and then you can wash the ink off the paper and then drink it. And it's in the Ars Notoria.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And so that's a grimoire.
Bro, hold on. What's that called?
The grimoire is called the Ars Notoria.
The Ars Notoria.
Notorious.
It's a grimoire on how to learn everything. Like, that's the promise. It's a 4-month procedure, and you have like complete knowledge. I mean, like every language, everything that you could know. You know.
We're gonna keep that section for the patron only hour once we're off of here. Subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/the101podcast, to learn how you can absorb all the knowledge alchemically and through the use of this grimoire. I'm just kidding, but yeah, it's really interesting, bro. They talk about.
And they do that. It's prescribed in there as part of it to write down, I think, names of angels or some sort of prayers on leaves, and then wash the ink off and drink the water afterwards.
Makes sense. Like writing itself, I mean, the history of writing and you know, channeling God energy or channeling the energy and writing it down is this form of getting the intuition in tune with the divine. And if you were to get channeled messages from gods as you're writing in that flow, that free form flow, you know, traditionally you would never lift the pen from the page or never lift the quill from the page.
That's why they don't teach us cursive anymore, because that was a lot more powerful. How you're saying you have that huge hyper sigil versus this chicken scratch. I mean, my handwriting is horrible, but the chicken scratch that you do now, right, where it's like little by little. I have here the Codex Gigas, which is the Devil's Bible. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, pull that up, because I was just going to say we kind of skimmed over that, but this is super important when it comes to channeling divine energies. The story behind the Codex Gigas is nuts and wild, obviously. But let us not forget how heavy and huge this book is. Massive. Okay.
Tall, right?
How many goat skins was it made out of? It I think it was made with over 100 goat skins to make this book. and yeah, it took two guys to carry the book, and so yeah, if someone else wants to give the story of how the Codex Gigas came to fruition, it is quite a fascinating story.
So I have it here. Let me pull it up real quick. So the Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil's Bible, is famous for two reasons. It is believed to be the world's largest preserved medieval manuscript. Codex Gigas means giant books, and it contains a large full-page portrait of the devil, which I'll pull up here in a second. But it was created for a Bohemian monastery, but was brought to Sweden as spoils of war in the 17th century. Among other things, the manuscript contained a complete Bible, historic texts, magical formulas, and spells. So it was a grimoire. It was at least 800 years old. Let me pull up a picture here of, I think there's actual pictures of the actual thing. It contains a number of parts. So it has the Old Testament and New Testament, two works of Josephus.
You know that the interesting part is that on the Old Testament, I think I don't have notes in front of me or anything, but you could verify this one. I think that it's missing the beginning of Genesis or something really trippy. It has Genesis, but it's missing like the Adam and Eve story, something really interesting like that.
All right, hold on. Let me pull this up. Hopefully we don't summon anything by showing this on air, ladies and gentlemen.
The other thing too is that it was supposedly written in one night. It was a channeled work that was supposedly written in one night. And that's kind of why like some of the images in there kind of look what some people would call rudimentary. And now if that part of the story is true or not, I mean, that's up for obvious debate, but it is huge. I mean, you're writing one page is 2 feet long. So it's not like, you can write a book in one night. Sure. Can you write it and draw pictures in one night? Maybe, but on a 2-foot book, come on, get out of here.
Yeah, it's like my copy of The Secret Teachings of All Ages. I got the big boy, and it's kind of not this size, but it's pretty big. It's like I think it's 24 inches long, I think, or 22 inches long.
What's funny is Ash versus Evil Dead, that show that came out, what actually touches in on this. They're pulling the book itself that is the Evil Dead is basically the Satan's Bible, because they say it has the face on the front, right? It's literally made out of dead body skin. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more human skin books out there that we're not touching on, or just skin books in general. Really fascinating part of history. And, using, these different excrements and body parts for alchemical processes. It's a huge part of alchemy, a huge part of like this transcendental ability to intuitively channel the divine, whatever that version of the divine is in that moment. And in this case, it's obviously something maybe a little darker than what most, woo-woo hippies like myself might consider divine now, rainbows and butterflies. So I just find that to be really interesting.
So the legend goes, according to one version of the legend that was already recorded in the Middle Ages, the scribe was a monk who broke his monastic vows and was sentenced to be walled up alive. In order to avoid this harsh penalty, he promised to create in one night a book to glorify the monastery forever, including all human knowledge. Near midnight, he became sure that he could not complete this task alone, so he made a special prayer, not addressed to God, but to the fallen angel Lucifer, asking him to help him finish the book in exchange for his soul. So we have a Faustian pact, one of the OG Faustian pact stories, right?
Yeah.
The devil completed the manuscript, and the monk added the devil's picture out of gratitude for his aid. In tests to recreate the work, it is estimated that reproducing only the calligraphy without the illustrations or embellishments would have taken 20 years of non-stop writing. Damn. So we're going to pull up here the picture of the devil. And this dude was like, yo, homie, I'm about to get walled up in this wall. I need you to come help me and finish this book. So the devil was like, yo, I got you, fam, but I just need one thing. And he's like,
Zoom
yo, what's
in.
that? He's like, yo, I need your soul, bro. Oh, come on.
I don't want to give you my soul. Can I give you a Butterfinger candy bar instead?
So, Romy, would you or would you not do it if you had to give up? I mean, being walled up alive, which that was a thing back then. They would
Go pull up my screen. I got that on there for you, for everybody.
Wow, bro. There you go. Where you at? In Meermint. Yikes. So, and also, check out, yo, we got some fire on the Patreon. We brought up the Mellified Man the other day and how crazy that was because of you, Romy. We talked about the Mellified Man, but we got so much fire on the Patreon. Look at that. The dude's being, would you do it, bro? Would you?
Oh yeah. I'm at peace, bro. I'm with death.
Also, you'd be cool with getting walled alive. You wouldn't take the deal with the devil?
Nah, no need.
No? All right, sure.
I would just soil myself, keep myself warm, embellish in my own smells.
It's like the practice of the monks that would mummify themselves for 3 years in that practice. And what at the very end, if you rotted, you essentially didn't achieve nirvana and you would be buried. But if you did the actual thing correctly, you would be worshipped essentially. But the idea of mummifying yourself for 3 years and dying, you're literally being buried alive because they put you in this box at the end. And you have to ring a bell every day so they know that you're not dead. Bro, for 3 years? Oh, man. And then, all right.
Interesting about the bell, actually, because you brought up Rudolph's bell earlier. I mean, the spiritual incantation behind a bell in general to literally, resonance is one thing.
Bach tower, bell tower also.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Bach tower and the bells had the largest. It's got a name.
Organ, yeah.
No, it had the largest library of that certain type of bell, and yeah, I think that the bell, the way it resonates, resonance and all that stuff. Romy, you've talked about it before, but yeah, dude, I don't know, man. I think that I wouldn't take the deal. I think I'd. Well, first of all, don't break your vows, right? What do you have pulled up here?
So there was 3 different here it says, oh shit, it's way up here, sorry. Blah 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 blah. Rudolph's collection was divided into 3 categories: Naturalia covered natural history, zoology, botany, mineralogy, and his collections of Naturalia albums may be the largest still in existence. The next is Scientifica, included clocks, watches, celestial globes, and other instruments. Artificialia influted what the fuck, featured coins, prints, and other examples of fine craftsmanship, right? So the first parts of Naturalia is this Bezoar's cup. Now all of these held very spiritual and mystical qualities, and they were all very important, and they most likely presumed in a room where everything else had revolved around these special specific ideals and mysticisms. So this is the Bezoar cup. Well, what's a Bezoar? A Bezoar is a hard mass formed in the intestinal system of a certain ruminant mammal, such as a goat. The word Bezoar, it's a literal stone. Like it's a gallbladder stone. The word Bezoar comes from the Persian word pad-zar, which literally means antidote. From at least the 12th century, Muslim physicians held that drinking vessel containing a bezoar was capable of neutralizing any poison, and in consequence, these objects were highly prized. In this case, Rudolph's artisans have gone one better by fashioning a large bezoar into a drinking vessel. So this was once a stone inside of a goat's belly. The top has been sliced off and the middle hollowed out to create a cup. The lid of an enamel gold has been affixed above, and an oval foot at a vase-like stem below has been attached to the band by 3 clasps to avoid harming the precious object itself. Now here's another bezoar. Here they were often adorned with different precious stones and metals. Queen Elizabeth I, also, obviously a very occulted queen, who ruled from 1558 to 1603, had a bezoar set in a silver ring. And some people sometimes described the pale beige of her robes as bezoar colored, says an article in Nautilus. Here's another one. These were everywhere. Bezoar stones were very, very prevalent. But the thing is not only what they did with them, but how they got them, right? So were they farming these animals and making sure that they had the bezoars within them? How were they finding them? They weren't just finding roadkill, right? Were they like how?
What are your thoughts on that? Because I actually read about that, about all the different stones that they were fascinated with, like gallbladder stones and all these different things that the body created.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, the body itself, right? Let's talk
Is
about
the
alchemy.
alchemical chamber, right?
Boom. So this is a philosopher's stone. This is a stone of the of not the philosophical, but the physical alchemical chamber. So it obviously has to hold some metaphysical qualities. There's something that can be harnessed from this. I don't know, bro. It's nuts. I really don't know what to think of it just yet. Because I've only dug so deep into it. Because I was trying to, for this presentation or this chat with you guys, was just like, it was like, okay, where do we begin? Like, there's so much shit to talk about, and I got almost 100 slides here, and I was just like, but this is one of the more fascinating things. But this right here looks like a globus cruciger. Yet again, to touch on that cup, or it looks like the alchemical symbol of Earth. Perhaps obstruction by food, bolus, or bezoar is by no means so uncommon and should be borne in mind in differential diagnosis of obstruction. The legend of the bezoar stones, which was generally credited in olden times, was that they were crystallized tears of deer. The deer ate snakes, which caused such intense stomachache that tears were brought into the animal's eyes, and these subsequently congealed beneath the lid as stones. These fell out and men gathered them up. Cases of poisoning and other noxious diseases were said to have been cured by them, and one was used at last resort at the death of King Charles II. It may possibly be of interest to the academically minded surgeon to consider. Hold on.
It's all good, bro. You got that alchemical construction truck in the background there beeping away.
Yo, bring that compost over here. I'm looking for the gallbladders. It may possibly be of interest to the academically minded surgeon to consider that which once was a magical stone endowed with life-giving properties is now a cause for surgical intervention and a portent of evil. In Europe, in the 16th century, though, well before they fell out of favor, a barber surgeon named Ambrose, which is interesting name, right? Ambrosia, almost like ambrosia.
The food of the gods, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Spoke against them. He's like, to test the effectiveness of bezoars, he gave the condemned criminal poisonous mercuric chloride and a bezoar. The man died an unpleasant death, reinforcing Pear's belief that they were ineffective. He's like, "Oh, it cures poison, huh? Well, let me give you some. Let me give you some poison and then a bezoar directly afterwards to see if it works." What a dick.
It's like the Taoist alchemists. They're like, "Yo, we gotta live forever. Yo, let's drink some mercury and see what happens." They're trying to live forever. But yeah, the idea of the philosopher's stone or the elixir of life, we're thinking in terms of material things, of liquid, of an actual stone. Well, you also have the interpretation, how you're saying, with spiritual alchemy. Well, it's not so much the elixir of life maybe perhaps isn't a drink or a liquid of some sort. What if it's like a breakthrough of space and time itself, something metaphysical?
Right. So it is both. It's the intersection of spiritual and physical alchemy, which is most likely sexual fluids. It's because those sexual fluids contain life in them, the ability to create something out of.
What was that alchemist that he said all ski? Was was it Lil John? Was that?
Yeah, Little John. Yeah, the Little John
Yeah.
the Baptist. Yeah.
Maybe he was onto something, and
Younger,
maybe
yeah.
that, right, they've been right hidden in plain sight. They've been putting these occulted things and all along, bro, right? It's hidden in plain sight. We don't know about it because we just turn a blind eye to it. But maybe
From
he was
the
right.
Bezors to the balls. To the balls.
Exactly. That sack, baby. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, and look at the representation, bro. You got right this very phallic here, this globus cruciger, and I mean, who knows, bro? I think that these dudes were also onto that, right? They have the fish-headed cap, like the Pope with the fish head cap thing, whatever. So they point out other things that, again, it's symbolism for a reason, bro. I mean, we're just thinking outside the box. What is that?
This is one of his other famous cups,
Yeah, that's dope.
That's crazy.
right? And look, it's got the tiny little crown on top. Like,
Yeah.
dude, like all his stuff that he had was so highly detailed.
Sir Little John the Baptist to sweat drop down the Bezor stone. Bezor stone. Oh man. Little John the Baptist.
This guy was very this
Is that the mineralogy guy? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's him.
Yes. Who, like, all this stuff was like all the information basically that like Rudolf was given about this was given to him from let's say his name, Anselmus de Boot. He like basically is the father of mineralogy. He was a Flemish humanist, mineralogist, physician, and naturalist, along with a German known as Gregorius Agricola, very famous. De Boot was responsible for establishing modern mineralogy. De Boot was an avid mineral collector who traveled widely to various mining regions in Germany, Bohemia, and Silesia to collect samples. His definitive work on the subject was the Gemmarium de Lapidum Historia, the history of gems, basically. De Boot was also gifted as a gifted draftsman who made many natural history illustrations, developed a natural history taxonomy. He created lapidary too, the first lapidary, basically.
Interesting. So I want to add that the entire court of Rudolf II, I mean, we could do an episode on each and every single one of these guys, by the way, which we probably will. I mean, we could probably do a series of the magic circle of Rudolf II. You have Tycho Brahe, you have Nostradamus, you had John Dee, Edward Kelly, you had all the greatest. And I want to talk a little bit about Edward Kelly after you're done, Romy, and John Dee when they went and visited him, because I think that's an interesting story. And you can think of Rudolf as the stereotypical, right, the bored king that's just sitting there waiting for them to talk, like stoic, right? They talked to how they didn't have a sense of humor, and they're very stoic, during whenever people would be talking. So I imagine John Dee telling him like, "Yo, you're possessed by demons, and we need to form a one world hermetic religion because these angels told me." Can you imagine that, bro?
Oh my god. And he believed it. So we didn't even touch on the fact that so it's important that he had the Bezor's cup because he constantly thought that he was going to get poisoned. He was super paranoid that somebody was out to get him, right? Whether or not it was his family, whether or not, because I mean, you're an emperor, right? You're a king. Someone's coming to take the crown. You don't get to be king for long. Like, someone's going to kill you. And so I think the Bezor's cup was part of that, his special piece. He needed as much magic on his side in order to not die. So yeah, I mean, dude, guy's nuts, bro. It's so crazy. Such a good topic to talk about for life. I mean, this is different scholars, like, this is their life's work. A lot of people, like, Rudolf in Prague, like, this is their entire life. So to think we can cover it all in a 3-hour podcast is ridiculous.
And that's what blows my mind too, with like, right, I envy people who can just, because I'm on like a sort of a schedule when it comes to podcasting, right? I have to pump out content, and then in between these type of things I have to also read for other presentations I have, or if I'm gonna have an author on or whatever. But how you're saying, bro, we're talking about things that quite literally people spend their entire lives. People get doctorates and PhDs and right, the esoterica of Rudolph or John Dee or you name it, and the Renaissance, whatever it is, and they spend their entire life, and then here we are, just a couple regular guys cracking dick jokes, talking about the Philosopher's Stone and balls and Bazaar stones and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. Was this part of his collection as well? This rhino that cup looks baller, bro.
Yeah, dude. Well, this cup, I don't know why I put this slide in between that, but this is also a rhinoceros horn cup too. And it's funny to, you know, symbolize the horn with the horn. And I mean, we talked a little about the Templars earlier, and now we're going to get into that, but you know, the three-headed horned deity is very significant. But yeah, dude, isn't this epic? Rhinoceros horn is another natural substance traditionally credited with medicinal powers. Although today it is regarded as an aphrodisiac and remedy for impotence, in folk medicine, in the court of Rudolf II, it was rather supposed to repel calumny, evil, and the forces of the underworld. Hence the dichotomy of menace and mollification, which recurs across the remarkable object. Warthog tusk, believed to be the horns of a mythical dragon called Wyvern, are refashioned to provide the horns of a two-headed beast with fangs bared in the front, but subdued by restraints in the back. In his mouth is a fossilized shark's tooth, regarded as offering protection against poison. The lid below crawls with beetles, lizards, frogs, and other subterranean creatures, probably cast from Lake in Nuremberg. Likewise, the rhinoceros horn itself has been carved to depict newts, insects, animal heads, and branches of coral. But above them emerge gentle human faces and symbols of healing power and the cosmos.
Again, very talismanic in nature, right? That microcosm to evoke the macro. And dude, I remember as a kid going to church, and whenever they would have that horn, because I went Pentecostal, they would have the horn. They would blow the horn during the services, and bro, that horn, whenever you would get a whiff of it, bro, it smelled like death.
Oh
yeah, it smelled like death. Bro, I was like, you know, like I don't know what animal it is. It's like some.
The ram.
Is it a ram's horn?
Yeah.
Oh my god, bro! It smelled so bad. Whenever they would put their mouth on it and be blowing that thing. Yeah, dude, it's just horrible.
I was like, I thought it was kind of interesting, like the cornucopia and the horn cup. You know, like because the cornucopia was like this bounty, this endless, you know, you could just like keep dumping out fruits and veggies. And if anything, you know, especially that Vertumnus painting, that very famous Vertumnus painting is a cornucopia itself. And so I thought that was kind of significant and symbolic, slightly. Rhinoceros horns had long been venerated in China as possessing magical and medicinal properties. But in the 16th century Europe, the rhinoceros was already creating a mythology of itself. The famous woodcut print of a rhinoceros by none other than Albrecht Dürer, created in 1515, was extremely popular throughout Europe and had a huge cultural impact. The Sultan Murtavar Shah II, ruler of Cambay, had presented the beast as a diplomatic gift to Afonso de Albuquerque, governor of Portuguese India, who then forwarded it to King Manuel I of Portugal. This was the first living rhinoceros that had been seen in Europe since Roman times. It created a huge stir, inspiring stonemasons to complete the Manueline Bellum Tower, then under construction, with rhinoceros horn heads as gargoyles. A sculpture of rhinoceros based on Dürer's image was placed at the base of an obelisk placed in front of the church and the sepulchre in the Rue Saint Denis of Paris in 1549, the royal entry welcoming the arrival of new King Francis Henry II. I thought that was kind of interesting also because, you know, in Egyptian stories, the mother is the hippo. You know, she is the pregnant one, the one that burst life. And you know, hippos and rhinos are very similar in my opinion. And you know, it's almost like the masculine version of the hippo. So like the father would be the rhino. That's speculative, obviously, but that's why another reason why I thought that was really significant, that they would put that on the bottom of an obelisk, and have that there, almost like a sign of, like, you know, the patriarchal or the phallus. Here's another rhino horn carved dragon. Look at this thing.
Wow,
That's wild looking, man.
if you look up William Blake, I don't know if you guys like William Blake.
Yes, I do love William Blake.
He has a painting. I think it's called Leviathan. It's like Leviathan and Behemoth, and it's a painting that he made as part of his Jerusalem works, and it was a picture of what, basically the battle at the end of the world. And it's kind of what you were just saying, where it's this masculine, feminine type thing. In the feminine, the world ends sort of with a battle between these two creatures.
Is it this one or this one?
It's that one. That's
is this
the
one?
Another one before.
This one?
One of them is a rhinoceros, more or less. I mean, he kind of changes it up where it has like tusks instead of a horn, but it's based on a rhinoceros. And then it's battling. So that's Behemoth, the rhino. And then it's battling Leviathan, which is like a sea monster. And it's, I mean, of course, it's highly symbolic, but it's really interesting. It's in that same tradition of like rhino occultism, you know?
Yeah. And
I never made that connection actually with the rhino and because you don't see rhinos in alchemical paintings. You see more dragons, and you see
it came a little later. Like, that's what he was saying.
It's wild. And you know, dragons, obviously serpentine energy associated with feminine. You know, dragons and serpents always kind of associated with that. Super interesting. The last little one I have here for the three types of things that you would find in his
Kunstkammer, bro. It's all right.
Kunstkammer, sorry.
The cabinet
so
of
many
curiosities,
words.
Bro.
The cabinet of curiosities, which is really rare and fascinating. This story is super cool. Is an ewer made from a Seychelles nut. So the most extravagant of these three objects, which was also the rarest, okay, even more rare than a bezoar stone, more rare than a rhinoceros horn, was the Seychelles nut. It is half of a hollowed nut from the species. It's a type of palm. I'm not going to try to say these fucking names. Sorry. A plant endemic on only two small islands of the Seychelles archipelago. Since these islands were uninhabited and virtually unknown before the 1740s, the origin of the Seychelles nut remained a complete mystery during the 17th century. The nut is the largest fruit of any plant in the world, weighing up to 42 kilograms. When one of these fruits falls into the sea, its great weight and density that it sinks straight to the bottom of the ocean, and after a considerable period on the seabed, the husk falls away and the internal parts of the nuts decay, and gases forming inside cause the nut to rise from the surface. These dense nuts can drift for thousands of kilometers on ocean currents without decaying further, and were known and very prized in medieval times in many parts of the Indian Ocean. Seamen from Malaysia, from over 5,000 kilometers away, occasionally observed cocoa de mer nuts falling upwards from the sea floor. From this, they concluded that these nuts must grow on underwater trees in a forest at the bottom of the Indian Ocean, hence the name sea coconut, from the French coco de mer, which is still commonly used today. Early European explorers communicated this lore to eager readers back home. The first great historian of Portuguese exploits in Asia and added testimony regarding the healing properties of the coco de mer, which he thought to be superior to even those known of the precious stone bezoar. Local peoples prized it accordingly. In the Maldives, 2,000 kilometers east of the Seychelles, any sea coconut found in the ocean or on the shore was regarded as property of the king, and anyone withholding such a nut for himself or selling it to another could face the death of penalty. Rudolf II nevertheless managed to purchase one of these for the vast sum of 4,000 gold florins. Hence the exquisite craftsmanship deployed in creating the marine images which dominate the work. Neptune rides on hippocampi in the lid of his trident, missing two back-to-back tritons carrying the pitcher, which has been hollowed out to carry liquid. The half nut forms the shape of a ship, which further maritime motifs carved into the surface.
You know what other nuts float, bro? These nuts.
These nuts.
Do I have that sound? Hold on. No, I don't have that sound. Oh well. Anyways, yeah. Can't
Apologies
talk
for
about
this low res picture of this magnificent.
Yo, if that nut don't stop, bro.
Oh no! What? No! What the fuck just happened? God damn! That's gonna bring me back to the top.
So very interesting collection of curiosities, the Cabinet of Curiosities, right?
Yep.
It was a phenomenon during the time, and it was, again, to serve as a sort of microcosm to the macro. And it was more of, for Rudolf, it was more of a contemplation, right? Place where he could go and reflect and think about whatever. And also serve for his posse. It was like, yo, let's go through here and let's learn some stuff. Longo, did you have anything to add about that?
Oh, your brother's on the chat's getting pissed.
That's what he said. The fuck are you doing? Oh man. It's all good, bro.
No, I didn't have anything to add. That was crazy. I'd never heard any of that though. That's really
that's wild, dude.
I like that they thought like that. They literally thought there was a forest on the ocean floor that was just floating up these coconuts, which further like kind of employs this Indian Lemurian connection of.
It makes me think of the Epic of Gilgamesh, where he has to swim at the bottom to pick whatever. What was it, a plant or something like that at the bottom of the ocean, and he falls asleep on the way down. You know the Gilgamesh? You ever the Epic of Gilgamesh?
Yeah, I know Gilgamesh, but I don't know that story specifically.
the oldest piece of literature. Do you have anything to add to that, Longo? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where he has to go down and pick some magical plant or something at the bottom of the ocean?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories like that and it's even in the Bible where he has to go into the mouth of the whale.
Yes.
You know, like that sort of stuff. And Pinocchio does the same thing. It's kind of in the ocean is the unconscious too, symbolically.
Oh,
Pinocchio deserves an entire breakdown, dude.
What do you got here, bro? You have Giordano Bruno.
I mean, dude, Giordano Bruno deserves a whole show. I think maybe we should almost skip over this and just be like, Giordano Bruno was the father of, a lot of. In this book, they said that he basically came up with the idea of the original computer. Let's just put it at that.
Yeah, it was based. I think he brings up Raymond Lowell as well, because Lowell, the Lowellian, the idea of the first analog computer. I think it was Raymond Lowell. He was trying to, again, the idea of technology. The technology that we know today is sprouted from the mystical. It's about proving the existence of something metaphysical, right? Charles Babbage, the guy that the father of the modern day computer. Well, he tried to summon the devil, right? And the reason that he wanted to come up with the computer was to prove the existence of God. And I mean, he writes about this in his books. I mean, this is documented. And also you have Leibniz, which was obsessed with Descartes and his whole monadology, where they wanted to break God down into a substance, right? We're talking about alchemy. Well, they wanted to break God down to a substance. You had John Dee and the Monas Hieroglyphica. That was also, wasn't it given to Rudolf? Was it for Rudolf or Maximilian? I don't remember who it was. I believe it was for Rudolf. And he's like, yo, this is too dense for me, bro. I don't understand it. So he gave that because it was traditional back then to write a piece of literature and dedicate it to whatever emperor, king was in power at the time. And I believe it was the Monas Hieroglyphica. Let me look it up here real quick. Was written for Rudolf II, And of course, Elias Ashmole.
Which is hilarious to say that the Monas Hieroglyphica is too dense for him while he had the Codex Giga and the Voynich manuscript. And like the Monas Hieroglyphica is like 20 pages, you know, like, or something like, I mean, obviously it's like alchemically and cipherically deep, but I find that kind of funny.
Can't find who he dedicated it to, but I'm pretty sure it was dedicated to.
One of the comments mentions that Pinocchio is a homunculus.
100%. I mean, you said it, not me.
Yep. No, we will do a Pinocchio show, no doubt.
I want to do a Pokemon show, an alchemical breakdown of Pokemon, and we can do Pinocchio. So
okay, yeah, Pokemon's a huge universe. I don't even.
But it's very alchemical. I mean, you have all the elements and all that stuff. I mean, I think it'd be a fun show to do with Gabe and just like have at it. Okay, I can't find the connection with Rudolph. All right, right here. So Monas Hieroglyphica. I'm pretty sure it was for Rudolph. Anyways, the idea of breaking God down to like this substance, right, to use it for whatever as a talisman. Well, the Monas Hieroglyphica was just that. It was a way of, if you were to intake the Monas Hieroglyphica, you'd become invisible or something along those lines. Well, essentially the conspiracy is that John Dee's the demiurge and he was able to transcend reality and manipulate it because of the Monas Hieroglyphica. Again, it's just speculation, but let's see here. What else you got there? You want to talk about the end of this dude's life? So at the end of his life, he was pretty much overtaken and stripped of all power. His brother took all power, and at the very end of his life, how old was he when he died? Let's see here. He was 59 years old when he died, and he was pretty much penniless, didn't have anything to his name other than the empty title of Holy Roman Emperor. And then shortly after his death, when his brother took over, was the 30 Years' War. Now, you had an interesting take on why he was always sad, Romy. And I mean, we can get into speculation at this point because I mean, we pretty much talked about his life and his ideas. He was very into Hermeticism, alchemy, the occult, the metaphysical. But you had an interesting thing that you told me over the phone as to why he was sad and depressed. Remember what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah. Please go though. Please go.
No, I wanted you to explain it because what you were telling me made a lot of sense to me, that he was sad because he understood that his family was at the core of what was to come. Almost like some prophetic dream type of thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was sad for all of I mean, once he pierced the veil, right? I think he pierced the veil at a very young age. And I think he had somebody who was his role model that kind of gave him the early on truths, or he was just very naturally highly intuitive and was able to see through the bullshit. Maybe it was the trauma that he induced as a child, seeing all these people burnt alive. But I think one of the main melancholic types of things is that he had a lot of insecurities too, for being slightly what you might consider deformed or part of this like Habsburgian bloodline, and he maybe just
homosexual as well.
Yeah, also that too, brother. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, let me add that during Roman times and Greek times, I guess ancient Rome, Greco-Roman, whatever, it was not uncommon to have like a boy prostitute, I guess you could call it. I mean, so.
But what is uncommon is for the Holy Roman Emperor not to have a wife.
Yes, he talked about marrying a lot and never did actually marry.
Yep. Did you read about his son?
Yeah, so I wanted to, we forgot to talk about was it Don Carlos or something? One of his nephews.
It's great. Julius
Don Julio.
His son, or was it Julia?
Julio or something like that. Yeah. Anyways, the point that they would go crazy.
I don't think there were any Julios in Bohemia.
they would go crazy, and one of his sons actually ended up unaliving one of his wives or lady friends, if you will.
Yeah.
And he ended up he ended up being in prison after the fact and going crazy in prison. So this Mad King-esque.
The details are way worse though. He was
Do you have the details?
sort of. I don't have like it in front of me, but he killed basically his girlfriend. It was a girl that he met and took home and killed her and butchered her.
Yep.
Didn't just
Mutilated
kill
the
her.
body.
He disfigured her and cut her up into pieces. And then his dad was like, yeah, Rudolph was like, yeah, it's not going to fly. So they had to have him locked up. And he lived out only like a few more years before he died. It was like a ruptured appendix.
Stress.
Yeah. But he lived in complete squalor in prison. Like he put his shit on the walls and the whole thing. Like it was a real disaster.
It's crazy. I read that he cut his wife up into many pieces and like basically thought he was going to get away with it because he was like the son of Rudolph.
Yeah.
Like, come on, get out of here, bro. Like, but I think that's just part of the Habsburgian curse. I wonder. I was trying to find, and this was pretty last minute. I was trying to find like if there was like an ancient curse or something that like there was a battle between these family bloodlines or something. You know, not that I believe in curses or anything, but you know, I was seeing if there was any lore on that there was a family curse. Like, I don't know, man. Like, they were all nuts, and that was probably just because of the inbreeding.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the family curse is marrying your first cousin, and then repeating that like 20 times. That'll do it.
Just continue, just refining it.
Yeah, no curses needed at that point.
Oh, funny about cursive, huh? Well, yeah, like the typing or writing in cursive style and cursing. And so, real quick, you share my screen. I'm gonna just get these last slides out of the way, and then I'm done. No more. But this shit, I saved the best for last, in my opinion. One of my favorite alchemists I was able to find in his circles was this guy named Oswald Kroll. Now, this guy was right. He wrote down, you can find, and I'll share this in the show notes or on the comments or something. So we've been talking about talismans, and I don't want to bring it up until now. So talisman isn't just, you know, a stone that you have wrapped in gold and precious metals, right? They believed that you had to take those precious metals and you had to imbue them with other things. Now, a little bit about Kroll. The Kroll show, Nick Kroll, right? This bloodline lives on. Kroll believed that Aleister Crowley, exactly. And dude, Oswald Kroll is no joke when it comes to magic. Like, this guy was one of Rudolf II's favorite magical people that he had in his circle. It's one of his best friends. Now, Kroll believed that chemistry and alchemy were two halves of a tightly related field, in the same way that organic and inorganic chemistry are related. He used the framework of Paracelsus' work to organize his beliefs about the geometrically important relationships between various forms of matter and alchemical reactions, from rectangles to megagons. And I was like, what's a megagon? A megagon is a 1 million times gong, a polygon with 1 million sides, creating this type of shape. This is a megagon. And I was like, well, talk about gong therapy. Kroll believed that God and nature have put their signatures on all their works in the creation, from the highest stars to the smallest pebbles. It is the task of the adept to read the divine book of signatures and to understand the correspondences, the sympathies, and the antipathies in all things. Unfortunately, modern humans lack the grammar of this arcane language. It is to be found in the Hermetic hieroglyphs and the sacred letters of Thoth, in the universal language of the Logos, which correspond to the laws of geometry, form, and the movement and equilibrium. The adept's job, therefore, is to seek and restore the lost wisdom of the ancients, which we are all fucking doing. Everybody involved in this conversation right now, everybody in the chats, we are absolutely doing this. We are the adepts of our time. Okay, we are seeking to restore the lost wisdom of the ancients. Let's fucking go. Okay, so Kroll combined alchemy, astrology, and magic in his work. In order to make an amulet, he recommended, for instance, these following ingredients: 2 ounces of toads dried in the air in the sun, reduced to a powder, the menstruum of young girls, as much as you can get, crystals of white arsenic, 1.5 ounces of red arsenic, 3 drams of root dittany, equal amount of tormentil, 1 dram of unpierced pearl, 1 dram of coral, 1 saffron, and everything must be then reduced into a fine powder to make into a paste when the sun and moon are in Scorpio and when the moon is new. The paste then should be fashioned around an amulet.
Yikes. Don't tell me you did that, bro.
Like,
I wouldn't
what?
be surprised.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
So
Yo, real quick before you get into
Yeah.
that, I found, and it's Don Giulio. So it's
His other
Giul.
son.
Yeah. So again, known as Julius Caesar and Don Juan of Austria. So here, the exact number of children Rudolf had with his long-suffering companion is not clear. One source says 6, of which 3 were girls and 3 boys, and another says 8, of which 4 were boys and 4 girls. They had mixed destinies. The oldest daughter, Caroline, seemed to have married into the Borges family, but her 2 sisters retreated to nunneries in Vienna and Madrid. And of the younger sons, one was killed by a friend in an alley in Vienna in a dispute over a prostitute. Another died in the 30 Years' War. Now, this is what we were talking about. None of the children seem to have been remarkable except for I'm going to say Julio, who was also known as Julius Caesar and Don Juan of Austria. He seems to have been Rudolph's favorite and shared with him a fascination for clocks and mechanical instruments. But he was cursed with an unfortunate horoscope in the Habsburgian Portuguese inheritance and soon started to show signs of the same malady which afflicted Don Carlos, the son of Philip II, which he also went mad and they had locked him away. At 9, he started having epileptic fits. At 16, he began scandalizing the court with his arrogance and his cruelty to animals and servants. So he was like a little asshole. It was, again, the Game of Thrones, that one character, what's the dude's name? The one with the blonde hair. Galfrey or whatever. So again, very, very Game of Thrones-esque. In 1606, Rudolf had to send him away to the court of Krumlov Castle in southern Bohemia. As a savage huntsman, Don Julio lived there among weapons, fierce dogs, and uncured skins preying on local girls. So then, later on, if that was not bad enough, Rudolph's melancholy was further deepened by the news of his favorite son, Don Julio, banished to Krumlov Castle. He had spent his days in hunting and debauchery. One day he went too far. He seized, raped, and held captive a barber's daughter called Maruska from the local village. When after a month she ran away, he threatened to kill her and her father if she did not come back. On 17 February 1608, the day after her return, servants forced the door to Don Julio's apartment to find the girl hacked to pieces with a hunting knife, her eyes gouged out, her teeth broken, and her ears cut off. The Holy Roman Emperor's oldest and favorite son, naked and covered in excrement, was embracing his victim. He was confined to a chamber with the barred windows. 4 months later, he died like his cousin, Don Carlos, in mysterious circumstances. So, again, maybe he was like, yo, the king's son is a problem. Let's take care of him. Bada bing, bada boom. But, yeah, that was one of his sons. I mean, towards the end of Rudolph's life, I mean, everything kind of sort of came crumbling down on him, right? Like, he wasn't a bad emperor either. He wasn't a bad ruler, but everything just kind of caved in on itself. And how you're saying maybe him being so lenient to all these open religions led to this war.
Yeah.
And he ultimately lost power to his brother and was stripped of everything except for his title at the very end of his life. But yeah, pretty crazy life. And I was just reading this whole story and I was like, damn, I kind of felt bad for the guy.
He refused, by the way, on his deathbed, he refused the sacramental rites.
Sacrament.
So he refused.
Like his father. Yeah.
Yes, to see a priest. James Joyce also did that.
Yikes.
You know, you got to be pretty gangsta to refuse it on your deathbed. You know, because most people are like, I can't hurt. You know, these guys are going down with the ship.
Maybe he knew, bro. Maybe he knew that we're all being trolled and there's really nothing on the other side, and it's just.
My favorite is Constantine, who got baptized on his deathbed. I told you that. That's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't, because he thought, you know, what's the point of getting baptized and then sinning before I die?
Just save it for the end.
So I'll just wait to get baptized like 30 seconds before I die. So I enter heaven as just like this purified, purely baptized being, you know. It's like hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Thought he could outsmart the system.
So he's not wrong.
Yeah.
What do you got? What do you got there, homie Romy?
This? Oh man, I made some celebratory cake.
Talking
last
about
night.
your fucking slide, bro. Now you're whatever. Jeez.
Whatever. I made a wildflower chantilly cake or whatever. You an asshole. I'm just kidding. I love you. Fucking love you, buddy. Okay. So I wanted to share more of these crazy alchemical recipes that Kroll has, and these are all on document. I'm going to share the link with you guys here later. But if you guys are curious how to restore your memory, well, we have it for you. So, okay. If you want to restore your memory, you're going to need these herbs. You're going to need mace, cubeba, cloves, 3 of each, the leaves of senna, crystals of tartar, ginger, ground pine, root of calamus, aromat, gentian, seeds of cumin, mountain silver, anise, amaos, dacius, wild alexander, spikenard of India, the magistry of coral and pearls. Reduce them all into a powder, which thus must be taken in the first month, morning and evening, 3 hours before meat, and wine or other convenient liquor. In the second month, only in the mornings. In the third month, in the mornings thrice in a week. In the fourth month, twice in a week, and so forth for certain months. In comforting and restoring the memory of admirable use, the aqua magna... Okay, let's zoom in on this, y'all. Aqua animatus, described in the second part of his marrow of distillations, it is more powerful, the species of anacardine, to be extracted with it. Okay, so just some crazy
You know
shit.
what I love about, so go to the first one, dude. What I love about all these recipes, right? Like if you look at the first one, in restoring lost memory, especially in the age, powder of trithemius, so-called, will much help. And then it's like, is that the trithemius that like we like the stenography, I think is the OG cryptographer, like that's the guy who invented cryptography, I think it was. Yes. It's like the powder of trithemius. Yeah, it's like whenever you read like a homunculus thing, there's always one ingredient that you don't know what it is, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and try it. It's like, and then the stone of the sun. What does that even mean? You know what I'm saying? Like it always has like some obscure thing. It's like there's like the powder of trithemius. Oh, I know that one, right? I got some in my cabinet of curiosities, right? So.
No, for real. I mean, that's the cryptic essence of alchemy, right? In the alchemical text.
It blows my mind, man. Like the whole study of alchemy and all these crazy things that we talk about, that the fact that they're an actual concept or an actual thing. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Longo? Where do you think that these dudes were trolling everybody and they were just like speaking in code to one another and they knew that there was nothing to it, or that they were actually onto something and they were like, yo, let's speak in code because, you know, only the initiated can have this sort of thing.
With
like,
alchemy in particular, you mean?
Yeah, with alchemy, because I always sit between these two camps of like, it was all bullshit and then it was like they were really onto something, right? Like, I fight between those.
They
two.
were really on to something, but to me, yeah, it's symbolic. So it is like a spiritual alchemy, or like a psychological individuation, sort of a becoming whole and integrating parts of the self that are fractured, things like that. That's what it seems like to me, at least, because you have to understand that. And also, they were doing some real science, like real chemistry. So that was present, and that was seen as being secretive. So you didn't want to, let these secrets out, because that kind of stuff was seemingly magical. And so they wanted to communicate in code on that part. So
Codes and
we know to some degree they were doing, to some degree, all of the above are true. They were speaking in a code scientifically, and so it's multi-layered in a code that has to do with individuation and the psyche.
Yeah. And maybe that's why Carl Jung was also into alchemy. I haven't dug into, I have all his books, but I haven't dug into psychology and alchemy. I think it's the book Man and His Symbols is the first one I'm going to read, because I heard that's a good introduction.
There's one, I can't remember I think it was the green lion in alchemy. It represents, it's a real sort of chemical equation, and the green lion is like some sort of chemical compound, and it was like a secret, like don't let anyone know, but slip on this piece of paper and it's got like a green lion eating a sun, and they'll be able to replicate it if they're in on it. So we know they were doing that for sure. What we're speculating on is whether or not the psychological stuff is on purpose, or if you're just like sort of seeing shapes in clouds, kind of thing. But I think it's on purpose. It's just too good. Just like myths. I mean, either
extremely symbolic.
It's too spot on.
And when you think about it, it was not even that long ago. If we really think about it, this wasn't that long ago. It was fairly recent. I mean, it was a couple hundred years ago, really, but it wasn't that long ago that this was happening, and these symbols and all. I want to do an episode of straight just like looking at alchemical plates and just like trying to decipher them and see what's you know what I'm saying. Like because I love looking at that type of art, and it's really fascinating.
We should do like we've for fans of the show and people who subscribe to the Patreon, we had those dopamine deep dives we were doing consistently for a while. I think that was a great crew for that, and Longo would be a fantastic addition to that too. But I'd love that, dude. Like just to look at these things and really try to truly break it down, because what's interesting is thinking about how fast we've advanced technologically, right? Quote unquote advanced technologically, and like how within a span of 20 years, 30 years, you come from having a mundane flip phone to having like a super small touchscreen that you just have every piece of information at your fingertips. Well, it was the same way in this Renaissance period of, you had 20 inventors working on, these books and these alchemical texts. It was happening very fast. So, if you look at the past 1,000 years, which is crazy to be like, yeah, that's not that long of a time. Well, if we live 100 years old, right, that's only 10 of our family members is in a century, so 100 of our family members is 1,000 years ago. I don't know, like I'm soapboxing it here somewhat, but it's like I don't even know what the fuck I'm trying to say, y'all. Life is crazy, reality is nuts, and we're unfolding the fruits of the labor here. You know what I mean? Like, so what is really going on?
I found the green lion, by the way. I looked it up.
Oh yeah, pull that shit up, brother.
The green lion eating the sun, right?
Yeah, it's the aqua regia, and they called it which means royal water. It's a mixture of nitric acid and hydrochloric acid in a molar ratio of 1 to 3. It's a fuming liquid, colorless, and it dissolves metals, noble metals.
What I'm saying is, what if that's what they want you to believe? You know what I mean? Like, what if that's right? That's the practical, physical alchemy. That's like what happens when you do mix these things. Because I do think that what I love about alchemy is that it's a topic that's, right, we talked about this, interdimensional, where it's a physical thing, it's a spiritual thing, it's a psychological thing. And I think perhaps how Manly P. Hall puts it, the 7 seals, any scripture, and that can be holy scripture, ancient scripture, whatever kind of scripture, alchemical scripture, whatever. There are 7 different ways of interpreting it. right? You have the historical, you have the allegorical, you have the whatever. There's the literal. There's different interpretations of it, and I think that that's why these alchemists would focus on redoing these experiments over and over and over and over again, because they needed to achieve it on certain different levels. And once you were able to unlock that, you would hit that magnum opus, and it's like, boom, you would piece out of this dimension, and then just not exist. I mean, that's the only way you could really put it. Not, like, just dissolve out of reality. I mean, that's. But again, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I think for the next one, I think we should do another one, maybe one of these other guys, either Bruno or you had Kepler, you had Edward Kelly, John Dee, you had Descartes after the fact. I mean, there's just so many names that we can go down the list, but we'll figure it out for the next one to see who we break down. And
Definitely I think Bruno at some point.
Bruno's super interesting, right? So I don't know. Maybe we'll do Bruno. What do you think, Longo? Who do you like in this magic circle the most, if you had to pick? I know that's a hard question, but
yeah, probably Giordano Bruno. I mean, Bruno. John Dee is always really interesting, but he's like, you can do a whole series on him. You can't even just do one video.
It's almost like Carlos Castaneda. Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, we'll figure it out for the next one. I think this was. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Romy, before we?
I mean, there's so much, bro. I think it's good to maybe just cap it. Well, okay, let's talk about Rudolf for a second. We did slightly touch on the fact that he was most likely strategically taken out of power, right? Like he was in power for such a long time, fucking up in the eyes of his family, that it wouldn't surprise me at all that like the reason he thought he was going to constantly get poisoned is because one of his 15 siblings was coming for the throne.
And at the very end, he fired everybody too, right? I forgot to mention, he fired everybody and only kept like 2 people in his court to like be with him, because he didn't trust anybody at the very end. He was like, yeah, they're going to kill me. And you even said that they might have murdered him.
I think so. I think that's probably what happened. I mean, it's just like anybody else who gets too close to the truth, even though he was in Habsburg, he's not the most important royal family. There's an even more secretive family bloodline that was truly running the strings underneath it all. It's interesting to look at the papacy, right? And in comparison to the Holy Roman Empire, since they were on their own different things, as much as the Holy Roman Empire was like, fuck you, Vatican, you don't get to fuck with us. They were also like, well, you're not going to fuck with us, right? Because we got our own thing going on. Like, we got massive amounts of dragon bloodline symbolism running through.
And I'm sure they were sending their spies.
Exactly. So that's something we absolutely need to cover, is the other flip of the script and go more onto the papacy reign, because the House of Solomon, Solomonic magic is fully embedded in there. I mean, you look at the seal of the popes and it's 100% the seal of Solomon. I've done that weave before on a couple podcasts. And so.
And to add really quickly, El Escorial was also allegedly modeled after where Rudolf lived as a young boy, was allegedly modeled after the Temple of Solomon. I forgot to say that at the beginning, but yeah, we have all these ideas. Again, maybe he was some sort of scapegoat, maybe like a pseudo sacrifice of some sorts towards the end of his life. And then people keep bringing up Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in the chat, but you have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. You had Tycho Brahe where he had his nose cut off. So again, it's all very.
We've gone over that too, and not to say that that's a rudimentary by any means, not to be a fucking dick, but no, we'd gone over that when we first started diving into this magic circle months ago. You remember that, brother?
Yeah, I remember that. But I'll be honest, I didn't really think about Rudolph being that interesting, and I think that this would be a good movie, man. Like if his life.
Holy shit!
Like a show. Like didn't they do the Borgias or something like that on HBO? Like the I never saw it, but
the Bourgeoisie
or something like that, right? Wasn't it an HBO show? I could have swore it was.
I'm not sure. I'm excited to see this. Everybody should go watch this new Nicolas Cage movie called Renfield.
Coming out on Friday.
It's going to be good. Just another vampire situation. That'll be fun. But also everybody in the chat keeps talking about this episode that you dropped earlier this morning, bro. What's going on with that? Tell me a
Bro,
little bit.
I only drop bangers. I only do heavy hitters around here. I dropped episode 143, and it was probably one of the best episodes I've ever. One of the best, top 10.
No
right?
shit.
Top 10. Yeah, top 10.
Okay. All
And
right.
people really
Which one
enjoyed
was
that. So, again, bro, we only dropping bangers around here, man.
That's
again,
right.
This was fun. This was great. For people who want to read more on it, order your copy. Do you have any of these left, Longo?
I have one in the store.
Oof. How much is it gonna cost now, bro? $3,000?
I don't know. I gotta double check.
Oof. Well, you can hit up Longo. I mean, the initiated know where to hit him up. But if you guys want to check it out, The Magic Circle of Rudolf II, Alchemy and Astrology in Renaissance Prague. Maybe we should hit this guy up. This guy's still alive. Talk to this guy.
I did hit him up
Oh, you did?
months
You
ago.
did?
Yeah.
Did he write back?
No, he did not, but maybe I'll try it again.
Yeah, hit him up. Be like, yo, send him this episode. Be like, yo. And then he's going to be like looking at us talking about balls and sacks and the Philosopher's Stone. But yeah, check this book out. Hold on, this guy's pretty old, bro. He looks pretty old. So I don't know.
One thing on just a pretty basic exoteric viewpoint of what because there's obviously many philosopher's stones, right? Some people say that alcohol is a philosopher's stone, right? Encapsulating the spirit, something that never goes bad. It's tangible. It's able to extract other things. That's one of the philosophers. But also just creating humans, right? Many of the allegorical stories of creating children, the sun and the moon, masculine and feminine coming together, creating a homunculus, is just quite literally creating a child to harbor the fruits and to find the gold of reality by continuing your lineage. And that's something that I think Rudolf overlooked potentially, was that like he had these kids, but since he didn't really focus any time on like harboring that relationship, that depth of love, and that's what Giordano Bruno was all about too, is alchemical love and the truth of love being the raw reality of existence, and the answer to the cosmos was unconditional love. I just want to throw that out there. Also, Rising from the Ashes. We've been chilling on episodes because we're doing themed months. It's been a little harder to find guests, but we're diving into the Templars this next couple months. Have an episode with Freddie Silva coming out soon, famous author and great researcher. So, yeah, we're going to be doing all that stuff. Check it out. I love podcasting with Juan. Probably my... we're talking about unconditional love, man. Like, met this guy on the internet, like through podcasting, is definitely one of the best homies in the podcasting realm for that. Longo, you're the shit, dude. You and your brother are awesome, epic, amazing humans, man. It's just a pleasure to be here with you boys today.
Homunculus confirmed. Certified homunculus.
You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, this was all over the place, but it's fine. Hey, we're talking about history. It's fun to go on these tangents. I really enjoyed this. Hopefully, everybody who showed up enjoyed it. We had a good amount of people in the chat, and the chat was pretty lit. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Maybe do Giordano Bruno for the next one, and we'll see where that goes. Make sure to follow the show on social media at the 101 Podcast. TJOJP.com has all my links. Make sure to check out you got the Occultist Monday. I put out a new issue last week. And we got to check out the comic book, The Chosen One. It's all on TJOJP.com. Yeah. Narco, you want to plug anything? Longo, you want to plug anything?
No.
Before we get the fuck out of here? Well,
Nothing to plug.
nothing to plug. Well, everybody have a good night. Stay safe. We love you. And I'm going to play the outro for us to get out of here. This was on all the platforms. Follow me on Twitch, by the way. I made a Twitch channel and Facebook channel and all that stuff. So make sure to follow me on there. Love you guys. Stay safe and be good little homunculi. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. I have an episode dropping on Wednesday. So I'll catch you guys on the other side. All right, here we go. Hold on, let me pull up the video.